Welcome to Moonlit Romance Library. Please follow for more stories. Chapter 1: Blood on the Snow. The military parade square of Arventhor smelled like iron in winter. Alara Voss stood at the edge of the square, one gauntleted hand wrapped around the reins of her black warhorse, the other pressed flat against her own thigh to stop the trembling. The trembling was not fear. It was the aftermath of killing 7 men in the border ambush 3 hours ago, the last of whom had driven a serrated blade across her left wrist before she'd taken his throat with her sword pommel. The wound had been wrapped in a torn strip of her own cloak. The blood had frozen into the fabric. She could feel it cracking every time she moved her fingers. Behind her, Noctis, her warhorse, her oldest companion, the meanest animal in the royal stables, snorted and stamped one massive hoof into the snow. He did this whenever he was bored, annoyed, or plotting to bite someone. At present, she suspected all three. "Easy," she murmured. Noctis flattened his ears and tossed his head sideways, yanking the reins hard enough to jolt her injured wrist. She hissed through her teeth. He had the temperament of a drunken tavern brawler and the intelligence of a war strategist, and he had never once in his life been easy about anything. She'd found him 6 years ago in a burned-out border stable, a half-starved yearling with hooves too big for his legs and fury in every line of his body. The stable master had warned her not to go near him. "He bites," the man had said. "He kicks. He'll kill you if you try to saddle him." Alara had walked in anyway, because she'd recognized something in those wild black eyes. She had been 15. She'd had no wolf form, no noble bloodline, no mother, and a father who drank himself to sleep every night in a guardsman's barracks. She understood what it meant to be angry and have no one to explain it to. She'd sat in the corner of his stall for 3 hours. She hadn't touched him. She'd simply sat there eating an apple, and when she was done, she'd placed the core on the ground and left. The next morning, the core was gone. The morning after that, she brought 2 apples. By the 4th day, he'd come close enough to breathe on her hair. By the 7th, he'd let her touch his nose. He'd bitten her on the 8th day, hard enough to leave a scar on her shoulder, and she'd bitten him back. Not literally, but she'd flicked his ear so hard he'd startled backward into the wall. They had understood each other perfectly ever since. Now Noctis shoved his massive head against her back, pushing her forward half a step. He wanted to leave. He had wanted to leave since they'd arrived. Horses were not stupid creatures, whatever the nobles said, and Noctis in particular possessed an uncanny ability to sense when a situation was about to become terrible. But she could not leave, not yet. Ahead of her, the parade square was arranged in the rigid formations of a royal acknowledgement ceremony. The Council of Elders occupied the raised stone dais at the center, 7 ancient werewolves in silver-trimmed black robes, their faces carved into permanent expressions of disapproval. Flanking them were the noble houses, arranged by rank. Fur-lined cloaks, jeweled circlets, gloved hands clasped over embroidered sashes. To the left, the soldiers of the Crown Guard stood in polished rows, breath steaming in the cold. To the right, the court ladies and lesser nobles clustered together like a flock of brightly plumed birds. And in the center of it all, standing on the frost-covered stone with his back to her, was Aldrich. Crown Prince Aldrich Veyron, her fated mate. Even now, even with blood frozen to her wrist and 7 kills sitting heavy in her bones, the sight of him made something twist beneath her ribs. Not the mate bond, though that was there too, that low golden hum that had lived inside her chest since she was 17 and first felt it snap into place. This was older than the bond. This was memory. This was the boy who had pulled her out of a frozen river when she was 12, who had taught her the sword forms the weapons master wouldn't teach girls, who had sat beside her on a parapet at dawn and said, "You don't need a wolf, Alara. You already fight like one." She had loved him since before she knew what the word meant. Aldrich turned. Even across the width of the parade square, she could see how the cold had sharpened his features. The strong jaw, the dark brow, the mouth that was too severe for softness but had once smiled at her like she was the only warmth in the kingdom. His black hair was pushed back from his face, and his golden eyes, wolf eyes always, found her immediately. Something flickered there, pain maybe, or guilt. Noctis snorted again, louder this time, and Alara felt the reins go taut as he shifted his weight. He never liked Aldrich. Even in the early days when she and Aldrich had been inseparable, the horse had regarded the crown prince with the particular disdain of an animal who could smell dishonesty long before it arrived. "Stand," she told him quietly. He stomped, twice. She ignored him because Lady Cordelia Ashworth was stepping forward. Cordelia was beautiful. That had never been in dispute. She had auburn hair that fell in perfect waves, a waist like a drawn bowstring, skin that had never been within spitting distance of a battlefield, and a laugh that sounded like crystal chimes designed specifically to make other women feel inadequate. She was the daughter of Lord Ashworth, the wealthiest nobleman in Arventhor, and she had been presented to the council as a suitable Luna candidate 6 months ago. Around the same time, the whispers about Alara's lack of wolf form had grown too loud to ignore. Cordelia placed her hand on Aldrich's arm. It was a small gesture, delicate, possessive. Aldrich did not remove the hand. And then he spoke. "Lady Cordelia has stood faithfully beside the crown during the recent border conflicts," he said, his voice carrying across the parade ground with the practiced ease of a man raised to address armies. "Her devotion to the council's guidance and the traditions of our bloodline is beyond reproach." Beside Alara, Noctis made a sound that could only be described as derisive. She agreed with him, but she kept her face still. She had spent 10 years in this court. She knew how to hold her expression. She knew how to stand with blood soaking through her glove and not let a single person see her flinch. Elder Hargrave, the eldest and most venomous member of the council, leaned forward on the dais. "And what of the knight, Your Highness?" Aldrich's jaw tightened. She saw it, the microflexion, the way his eyes darted toward her and then deliberately pulled away. "The knight?" "Sir Alara Voss." Hargrave's voice was thin and precise, like a needle threading through silk. "Your personal guard. The soldiers report she single-handedly broke the ambush at the Thornwinter Pass this morning. 7 enemy wolves, was it? While the rest of your escort was pinned down?" Silence in the square. The soldiers shifted. Some of them had been there. Some of them had watched her walk into that ambush with nothing but a sword and a warhorse while they cowered behind overturned carts. "She performed her duty," Aldrich said. "Her duty." Alara's fingers tightened on the reins. "Indeed." Hargrave smiled, and it was the smile of a man who had already arranged the outcome of this conversation. "And what is her duty, precisely?" "I ask because there has been some confusion among the court about the nature of her position." Cordelia lifted her chin. The torchlight caught the sapphires at her throat. "Surely there is no confusion, Elder. Sir Voss is a guard, a sword, a useful tool." She let the word tool hang in the air like a jewel she was admiring. "But one does not elevate a hunting dog to the throne simply because it bites well." Laughter. Small, controlled, noble laughter, the kind that was designed to humiliate without providing anything concrete enough to challenge. Alara felt the bond pulse, Aldrich's emotions bleeding through. Shame, guilt, and underneath that, a desperate, furious fear she didn't understand. She waited for him to speak, to correct Cordelia, to say something. His golden eyes met hers across the square, and in them she saw the thing she'd been afraid to name for months. Apology. "Sir Voss is my guard," Aldrich said. His voice was clear and carried to every corner. "She is not my Luna. A woman without a wolf is unworthy of standing beside the throne." The world went very quiet. Or perhaps it went very loud and Alara simply stopped hearing it. The words hit her somewhere beneath the mate bond, beneath the muscle and bone, in the place where she had kept every promise he'd ever made her, every dawn patrol together, every battlefield prayer, every whispered "I will always choose you." A woman without a wolf. Unworthy. The nobles were watching her, the soldiers were watching her. Cordelia was watching her with barely concealed satisfaction, her hand still resting on Aldrich's arm like a flag planted on conquered territory. The council watched with the hungry patience of men who had been waiting for this moment. They wanted her to cry. She knew this with the clarity of a sword edge, They wanted her to kneel, to beg, to ask Aldrich to explain, to provide some spectacle of feminine desperation they could reference for years afterward when they needed an example of why wolfless women should not presume. Noctis pressed his nose against her shoulder. His breath was warm and his nostrils flared, and his ears were flat against his skull in the expression she recognized as his battle face. He wanted to charge. He had always wanted to solve problems by charging at them. In this, at least, they were not alike. Alara reached up and unclasped the silver badge from her armor. It was a simple thing, a wolf rampant over a crown, the mark of the royal personal guard. She had worn it since she was 18. It had been pinned over her heart when she'd killed her first enemy wolf. It had been stained with mud, blood, rain, and once, memorably, horse spit when Noctis had sneezed directly onto her chest during an inspection. She held it up so the torchlight caught it. Then she threw it into the snow at Aldrich's feet. The sound it made was very small. The silence that followed was enormous. "Servas," Aldrich began. "That's the last order I'll follow," she said. Her voice was steady. She would make it steady if it killed her. "And I wasn't a dog, Your Highness. I was the only one willing to stand between you and every blade aimed at your throat. The dog was whoever taught you to call it nothing." She turned. She mounted Noctis in a single fluid motion that sent a lance of pain through her injured wrist, but she'd mounted this horse in worse condition, with a broken rib once, with an arrow shaft still lodged in her thigh once, during a thunderstorm that had driven every other horse in the stable to panic. This was nothing. This was just her heart. Noctis needed no command. He surged forward, and the crowd parted. Not for her, but for him, because he was 16 hands of black fury, and he had a documented history of biting anyone who didn't move fast enough. Behind her, she heard Aldrich call her name. She did not turn. They reached the drawbridge before the shouting started. The royal city of Arventhor was built on a high plateau, accessible only through the Great Gate and its ancient drawbridge over the Frostclaw Gorge. The bridge was wide enough for 4 horses abreast, paved in dark stone, and flanked by carved wolf statues that had watched 1,000 years of comings and goings with the same blank expression. Noctis's hooves rang against the stone. Below, the gorge dropped into mist and darkness. Above, the sky was the color of a bruise, violet and black and swollen with snow that had not yet fallen. Alara stopped at the center of the bridge. The mate bond hummed inside her chest. She could feel Aldrich through it, his panic, his guilt, his fury at himself, his desperate certainty that she would come back. She always came back. She had always come back. After every slight, every public humiliation, every whispered insult from courtiers who called her the wolfless shadow, the broken blade, the guard who warmed the prince's bed because she couldn't warm his throne, she had swallowed it and she had come back. Not tonight. She closed her eyes. She reached inside herself, past the pain in her wrist, past the exhaustion in her bones, past 10 years of loving a man who could announce her worthlessness to the entire kingdom and still expect her to return. She found the bond. It was there, golden and warm, woven into the center of her being like a thread spun from sunlight. It connected her to Aldrich, his heartbeat, his breath, his wolf. She had lived with it for so long that she no longer remembered what silence felt like. She wrapped her will around it, and she pulled. The pain was immediate and absolute. It felt like reaching into her own chest and tearing out a rib. No, worse. It felt like reaching into her soul and ripping out the part that had learned to love. The golden thread screamed as it frayed. Noctis shrieked beneath her, rearing, because he could feel it too. The shockwave of a fated bond being forcibly severed, something so unnatural that even the stones of the bridge seemed to shudder. She didn't stop. She pulled until the thread snapped. The silence that followed was the most terrible sound she had ever heard. She swayed in the saddle. The world tilted. The gorge gaped below her like a mouth, and for one dizzying moment she thought she was going to fall, off the horse, off the bridge, into the dark. Noctis caught her. Not literally, because horses didn't catch people, but he did what he always did when she was about to break. He planted his hooves, lowered his massive body, and shifted his weight so that she felt. Welcome to Moonlit Romance Library. Please follow for more stories. Chapter 1: Blood on the Snow. The military parade square of Arventhor smelled like iron in winter. Alara Voss stood at the edge of the square, one gauntleted hand wrapped around the reins of her black warhorse, the other pressed flat against her own thigh to stop the trembling. The trembling was not fear. It was the aftermath of killing 7 men in the border ambush 3 hours ago, the last of whom had driven a serrated blade across her left wrist before she'd taken his throat with her sword pommel. The wound had been wrapped in a torn strip of her own cloak. The blood had frozen into the fabric. She could feel it cracking every time she moved her fingers. Behind her, Noctis, her warhorse, her oldest companion, the meanest animal in the royal stables, snorted and stamped one massive hoof into the snow. He did this whenever he was bored, annoyed, or plotting to bite someone. At present, she suspected all 3. "Easy," she murmured. Noctis flattened his ears and tossed his head sideways, yanking the reins hard enough to jolt her injured wrist. She hissed through her teeth. He had the temperament of a drunken tavern brawler and the intelligence of a war strategist, and he had never once in his life been easy about anything. She'd found him 6 years ago in a burned-out border stable, a half-starved yearling with hooves too big for his legs and fury in every line of his body. The stable master had warned her not to go near him. "He bites," the man had said. "He kicks. He'll kill you if you try to saddle him." Alara had walked in anyway, because she'd recognized something in those wild black eyes. She had been 15. She'd had no wolf form, no noble bloodline, no mother, and a father who drank himself to sleep every night in a guardsman's barracks. She understood what it meant to be angry and have no one to explain it to. She'd sat in the corner of his stall for 3 hours. She hadn't touched him. She'd simply sat there eating an apple, and when she was done, she'd placed the core on the ground and left. The next morning, the core was gone. The morning after that, she brought 2 apples. By the 4th day, he'd come close enough to breathe on her hair. By the 7th, he'd let her touch his nose. He'd bitten her on the 8th day, hard enough to leave a scar on her shoulder, and she'd bitten him back. Not literally, but she'd flicked his ear so hard he'd startled backward into the wall. They had understood each other perfectly ever since. Now Noctis shoved his massive head against her back, pushing her forward half a step. He wanted to leave. He had wanted to leave since they'd arrived. Horses were not stupid creatures, whatever the nobles said, and Noctis in particular possessed an uncanny ability to sense when a situation was about to become terrible. But she could not leave, not yet. Ahead of her, the parade square was arranged in the rigid formations of a royal acknowledgement ceremony. The Council of Elders occupied the raised stone dais at the center, 7 ancient werewolves in silver-trimmed black robes, their faces carved into permanent expressions of disapproval. Flanking them were the noble houses, arranged by rank, fur-lined cloaks, jeweled circlets, gloved hands clasped over embroidered sashes. To the left, the soldiers of the Crown Guard stood in polished rows, breath steaming in the cold. To the right, the court ladies and lesser nobles clustered together like a flock of brightly plumed birds. And in the center of it all, standing on the frost-covered stone with his back to her, was Aldrich. Crown Prince Aldrich Veyron, her fated mate. Even now, even with blood frozen to her wrist and 7 kills sitting heavy in her bones, the sight of him made something twist beneath her ribs. Not the mate bond, though that was there too, that low golden hum that had lived inside her chest since she was 17 and first felt it snap into place. This was older than the bond. This was memory. This was the boy who had pulled her out of a frozen river when she was 12, who had taught her the sword forms the weapons master wouldn't teach girls, who had sat beside her on a parapet at dawn and said, "You don't need a wolf, Alara. You already fight like one." She had loved him since before she knew what the word meant. Aldrich turned. Even across the width of the parade square, she could see how the cold had sharpened his features. The strong jaw, the dark brow, the mouth that was too severe for softness but had once smiled at her like she was the only warmth in the kingdom. His black hair was pushed back from his face, and his golden eyes, wolf eyes always, found her immediately. Something flickered there. Pain, maybe. or guilt. Noctis snorted again, louder this time, and Alara felt the reins go taut as he shifted his weight. He never liked Aldrich. Even in the early days when she and Aldrich had been inseparable, the horse had regarded the crown prince with the particular disdain of an animal who could smell dishonesty long before it arrived. "Stand," she told him quietly. He stomped, twice. She ignored him because Lady Cordelia Ashworth was stepping forward. Cordelia was beautiful. That had never been in dispute. She had auburn hair that fell in perfect waves, a waist like a drawn bowstring, skin that had never been within spitting distance of a battlefield, and a laugh that sounded like crystal chimes designed specifically to make other women feel inadequate. She was the daughter of Lord Ashworth, the wealthiest nobleman in Arventhor, and she had been presented to the council as a suitable Luna candidate 6 months ago. Around the same time, the whispers about Alara's lack of wolf form had grown too loud to ignore. Cordelia placed her hand on Aldrich's arm. It was a small gesture, delicate, possessive, perfectly calculated. Alara saw it. The entire square saw it. That was, of course, the point. Aldrich did not remove the hand. And then he spoke. "Lady Cordelia has stood faithfully beside the crown during the recent border conflicts," he said, his voice carrying across the parade ground with the practiced ease of a man raised to address armies. "Her devotion to the council's guidance and the traditions of our bloodline is beyond reproach." Beside Alara, Noctis made a sound that could only be described as derisive. She agreed with him, but she kept her face still. She had spent 10 years in this court. She knew how to hold her expression. She knew how to stand with blood soaking through her glove and not let a single person see her flinch. Elder Hargrave, the eldest and most venomous member of the council, leaned forward on the dais. "And what of the knight, Your Highness?" Aldrich's jaw tightened. She saw it, the microflexion, the way his eyes darted toward her and then deliberately pulled away. "The knight?" "Sir Alara Voss." Hargrave's voice was thin and precise, like a needle threading through silk. "Your personal guard. The soldiers report she single-handedly broke the ambush at the Thornwinter Pass this morning. 7 enemy wolves, was it? While the rest of your escort was pinned down?" Silence in the square. The soldiers shifted. Some of them had been there. Some of them had watched her walk into that ambush with nothing but a sword and a warhorse while they cowered behind overturned carts. "She performed her duty," Aldrich said. "Her duty." Alara's fingers tightened on the reins. "Indeed." Hargrave smiled, and it was the smile of a man who had already arranged the outcome of this conversation. "And what is her duty, precisely?" "I ask because there has been some confusion among the court about the nature of her position." Cordelia lifted her chin. The torchlight caught the sapphires at her throat. "Surely there is no confusion, Elder. Sir Voss is a guard, a sword, a useful tool." She let the word tool hang in the air like a jewel she was admiring. "But one does not elevate a hunting dog to the throne simply because it bites well." Laughter. Small, controlled, noble laughter. The kind that was designed to humiliate without providing anything concrete enough to challenge. Alara felt the bond pulse, Aldrich's emotions bleeding through. Shame, guilt, and underneath that, a desperate, furious fear she didn't understand. She waited for him to speak, to correct Cordelia, to say something. His golden eyes met hers across the square, and in them she saw the thing she'd been afraid to name for months. Apology. "Sir Voss is my guard," Aldrich said. His voice was clear and carried to every corner. "She is not my Luna. A woman without a wolf is unworthy of standing beside the throne." The world went very quiet. Or perhaps it went very loud and Alara simply stopped hearing it. The words hit her somewhere beneath the mate bond, beneath the muscle and bone, in the place where she had kept every promise he'd ever made her, every dawn patrol together, every battlefield prayer, every whispered "I will always choose you." A woman without a wolf. Unworthy. The nobles were watching her, the soldiers were watching her. Cordelia was watching her with barely concealed satisfaction, her hand still resting on Aldrich's arm like a flag planted on conquered territory. The council watched with the hungry patience of men who had been waiting for this moment. They wanted her to cry. She knew this with the clarity of a sword edge. They wanted her to kneel, to beg, to ask Aldrich to explain, to provide some spectacle of feminine desperation they could reference for years afterward when they needed an example of why wolfless women should not presume. Noctis pressed his nose against her shoulder. His breath was warm and his nostrils flared, and his ears were flat against his skull in the expression she recognized as his battle face. He wanted to charge. He had always wanted to solve problems by charging at them. In this, at least, they were not alike. Alara reached up and unclasped the silver badge from her armor. It was a simple thing, a wolf rampant over a crown, the mark of the royal personal guard. She had worn it since she was 18. It had been pinned over her heart when she'd killed her first enemy wolf. It had been stained with mud, blood, rain, and once, memorably, horse spit when Noctis had sneezed directly onto her chest during an inspection. She held it up so the torchlight caught it. Then she threw it into the snow at Aldrich's feet. The sound it made was very small. The silence that followed was enormous. "Servas," Aldrich began. "That's the last order I'll follow," she said. Her voice was steady. She would make it steady if it killed her. "And I wasn't a dog, Your Highness. I was the only one willing to stand between you and every blade aimed at your throat. The dog was whoever taught you to call it nothing." She turned. She mounted Noctis in a single fluid motion that sent a lance of pain through her injured wrist, but she'd mounted this horse in worse condition, with a broken rib once, with an arrow shaft still lodged in her thigh once, during a thunderstorm that had driven every other horse in the stable to panic. This was nothing. This was just her heart. Noctis needed no command. He surged forward, and the crowd parted, not for her, but for him, because he was 16 hands of black fury, and he had a documented history of biting anyone who didn't move fast enough. Behind her, she heard Aldrich call her name. She did not turn. They reached the drawbridge before the shouting started. The royal city of Arventhor was built on a high plateau, accessible only through the Great Gate and its ancient drawbridge over the Frostclaw Gorge. The bridge was wide enough for 4 horses abreast, paved in dark stone, and flanked by carved wolf statues that had watched 1,000 years of comings and goings with the same blank expression. Noctis's hooves rang against the stone. Below, the gorge dropped into mist and darkness. Above, the sky was the color of a bruise, violet and black and swollen with snow that had not yet fallen. Alara stopped at the center of the bridge. The mate bond hummed inside her chest. She could feel Aldrich through it, his panic, his guilt, his fury at himself, his desperate certainty that she would come back. She always came back. She had always come back. After every slight, every public humiliation, every whispered insult from courtiers who called her the wolfless shadow, the broken blade, the guard who warmed the prince's bed because she couldn't warm his throne, she had swallowed it and she had come back. Not tonight. She closed her eyes. She reached inside herself, past the pain in her wrist, past the exhaustion in her bones, past 10 years of loving a man who could announce her worthlessness to the entire kingdom and still expect her to return. She found the bond. It was there, golden and warm, woven into the center of her being like a thread spun from sunlight. It connected her to Aldrich, his heartbeat, his breath, his wolf. She had lived with it for so long that she no longer remembered what silence felt like. She wrapped her will around it, and she pulled. The pain was immediate and absolute. It felt like reaching into her own chest and tearing out a rib. No, worse. It felt like reaching into her soul and ripping out the part that had learned to love. The golden thread screamed as it frayed. Noctis shrieked beneath her, rearing, because he could feel it too. The shockwave of a fated bond being forcibly severed, something so unnatural that even the stones of the bridge seemed to shudder. She didn't stop. She pulled until the thread snapped. The silence that followed was the most terrible sound she had ever heard. She swayed in the saddle. The world tilted. The gorge gaped below her like a mouth, and for one dizzying moment she thought she was going to fall, off the horse, off the bridge, into the dark. Noctis caught her. Not literally, because horses didn't catch people, but he did what he always did when she was about to break. He planted his hooves, lowered his massive body, and shifted his weight so that she fell forward against his neck, instead of sideways into nothing. His mane was coarse and warm against her face. He stood absolutely still, his breath steaming in the cold, and he waited. She pressed her forehead against his neck and did not cry. After a long moment, she straightened. Her chest felt hollowed out, as if someone had scooped out everything soft and left only bone and determination. "Okay," she whispered. Noctis flicked one ear. Forward. He walked, steady, sure, carrying her off the bridge and onto the mountain road beyond the gate, into the snow and the dark and the vast, empty world that no longer had a golden thread connecting it to a man who had called her unworthy. Behind her, inside the city, she thought she heard a wolf howl. Aldrich's wolf, recognizing the severance, screaming into the night. She did not look back. Chapter 2. The Night Between. The stable widow's name was Marin. She had been waiting at the last way station before the mountain road, a stone shelter built into the cliff face, half hidden by snow, used by border patrols and occasionally by women leaving the royal city in circumstances that did not permit the main gate. Marin was 47, sturdy as an oak barrel, with iron-gray hair braided tight against her skull and hands that had seen more horse ailments than any noble healer had seen human ones. She had run the lower stables of Arventhor for 20 years, and in all that time she had been invisible. Nobles did not notice the woman who fed their horses. They noticed only when the horse was lame, and then they blamed her. Alara had noticed her. At 14, new to the guard barracks and friendless, Alara had spent more time in the lower stables than in the training yard because the horses didn't care that she had no wolf. Marin had found her there one night, a skinny blonde girl asleep in a hay pile with a wild yearling standing guard over her, and had simply draped a blanket over her and said nothing. In the years since, their friendship had been conducted almost entirely through the horse. Marin treated Noctis's hooves, trimmed his mane, checked his teeth, adjusted his saddle, mixed his feed, and reported his moods to Alara with the clinical precision of a field medic. She was the only person besides Alara that Noctis tolerated, and even that tolerance had limits. He'd bitten through 2 of her leather aprons, and once deliberately stood on her foot during a shoeing. Now Marin stood at the way station door with a lantern in one hand and a feed bag in the other, and she looked at Alara with the expression of a woman who had already heard the news and had been packed for 3 hours. "I changed his shoes this afternoon," Marin said, handing Alara the feed bag. "New iron, good grip for mountain snow. There's a poultice in the left saddlebag for that wrist. Don't argue, I can see the blood from here. And I packed dried meat, grain, 2 water skins, and the herb mix he likes. The one with the fennel." Alara stared at her. "How did you—" "I know that horse." Marin jerked her chin toward Noctis, who was already nosing the feed bag with the aggressive enthusiasm of an animal who believed every meal might be his last. "He's been agitated for 3 days, stamping, refusing the stable, snapping at the grooms. He knew before you did." Noctis lifted his head from the feed bag long enough to snort in what sounded like confirmation. Alara dismounted. The pain in her chest, the hollow, torn-open cavity where the bond had been, flared so intensely that she grabbed the saddle to stay upright. Marin reached for her arm, steadied her, said nothing about the way Alara's face had gone white. "I don't know where you're going tonight," Marin said. Her voice was quiet, practical, the voice of a woman who had lived her entire life in a world that undervalued practical women and had stopped expecting it to change. "But he knows." She nodded toward Noctis. "He's been impatient to take you away." Alara's throat closed. She wanted to say something. "Thank you," or "goodbye," or "I'm sorry I never spoke up when the stable master shorted your wages," or "you deserved better than this invisible life." But Marin was already adjusting Noctis's girth strap, checking the saddlebag buckles, running her hands along his legs the way she'd done 1,000 times. The border road is passable as far as the Grey Mark, Marin said. After that, you'll be in disputed territory. The enemy factions patrol the passes after dark, but they don't usually bother lone riders. Too much trouble for too little gain. She paused. Unless the rider is someone important. I'm not important. Marin looked at her with eyes that held 20 years of watching a wolfless girl become the strongest knight in the kingdom. You're important to him, she said, and touched Noctis's nose. That's enough for me. Noctis bumped Marin's hand with his massive head, and then, in a display of affection so rare that Alara almost lost her composure, he lowered his nose and breathed gently on the older woman's hair. Go, Marin said. And when you get where you're going, check his left foreleg. He's been favoring it, but he won't show you until it suits him. Stubborn creature. Alara mounted. The pain pulsed. Noctis moved beneath her, steady as stone. She rode into the snowfield. She made it 4 miles before the first backlash hit. The broken bond didn't heal cleanly. She had known it wouldn't. The old text said that severing a fated bond was like amputating a limb, except the limb was made of emotion, and the phantom pain lasted forever. What the old texts hadn't mentioned was the sound. A wolf howling inside her skull, not her wolf, because she didn't have one, but the echo of Aldrich's wolf, trapped in the remnant of the bond like a voice caught in an empty room. The pain doubled her over. Noctis stopped immediately, his ears swiveling back, and when she slumped against his neck, he turned his head and nudged her knee with his nose. Hard, repeatedly, as if to say, you are not allowed to fall off. I did not carry you this far for you to fall off in a snowfield like a sack of turnips. I'm fine, she lied. He stomped his hoof. I'm mostly fine. He stomped again, harder. Shut up. He didn't shut up. He stood in the middle of the snowfield and made increasingly offended noises until she straightened in the saddle and took the reins. Then, and only then, did he continue walking, at a pace that suggested he was doing her a tremendous personal favor. The snowfield was vast and empty under the moon. The border mountains rose to the west, dark and jagged, and the wind came down from the peaks carrying the scent of pine and stone and distance. Alara had patrolled this territory 100 times. She knew every ridge, every frozen stream, every abandoned watchtower. She had never ridden it alone at night, in pain, with no badge and no bond and no name except the one she'd been born with. It was, she thought grimly, a terrible night to be free. Chapter 3: Wolves in the Snow. They came from the north. She heard them before she saw them. The crunch of paws in snow, the low, coordinated breathing of wolves running in formation. Not feral wolves, werewolves. Shifted, moving fast, cutting across the snowfield in a flanking arc designed to close a trap. Alara's hand found her sword hilt. The motion sent a bolt of agony through her torn wrist, but she gripped anyway because the alternative was dying, and she had not ripped her own soul in half just to bleed out in a snowfield. Noctis felt her shift. His ears went flat. His stride lengthened. He knew this, the prelude to violence, and unlike most horses, he did not shy from it. He leaned into it. There were 6, no, 8, dark-furred, fast, moving in pairs. They weren't border wolves. Their formation was too disciplined, their coordination too precise. These were hunters, and they were hunting her. The first one broke from the pack and lunged. Alara drew her sword and cut. The motion was instinct. 10 years of training, 1,000 sparring sessions, 100 real fights. The blade caught moonlight as it arced, and the wolf yelped as the flat of the sword cracked across its skull. She didn't use the edge. She didn't need to kill. She needed to break the formation. Noctis screamed, a high, furious sound that no well-bred warhorse should make, and kicked backward with both hind legs. The wolf behind them tumbled, rolled, scrambled up dazed. 2 more came from the left. Alara wheeled Noctis, and he responded like the warhorse he was, pivoting on his haunches, surging forward, driving his armored chest into the nearest wolf and sending it sprawling. She swung the sword again, flat side, and felt the impact jar up her arm. But there were too many, and her wrist was failing. The torn ligaments protested every swing, and the backlash pain in her chest was still there, still throbbing, making her reactions a half-second slow. A wolf snapped at Noctis's leg. She kicked it away. Another lunged for her saddle. She smashed the pommel into its nose. The pack was regrouping. She could see it, the shift in their pattern, the way the remaining wolves were spreading out to encircle rather than attack head-on. They were adapting to her fighting style. That meant they'd been briefed. That meant someone had sent them. She was going to get off this horse and fight on foot, because from the ground she could protect Noctis's legs. She would not let them hurt him. She could take a wound. She could take 10 wounds. He could not. She swung down. Noctis tried to follow, and she shoved his head away. "Go! Run!" He didn't. He never did. He simply planted himself behind her like a black wall and bared his teeth at the circling wolves with an expression that said, "Come closer. I dare you. I have been wanting to bite something all day." Alara raised her sword with both hands. The wrist screamed. She ignored it. She set her feet in the snow and waited. The wolves charged. And then, light. Not torchlight, not moonlight. Something brighter and hotter, a blue-white flare that split the darkness like a blade. It came from the ridge above the snowfield, accompanied by the sound of hooves, fast, controlled, descending, and a voice that carried across the snow with a calm, almost conversational authority. "That's enough." A rider appeared on the ridge. He was silhouetted against the moonlit sky, and for a moment all Alara could see was the outline. Broad shoulders, a dark cloak, a horse that was almost as large as Noctis. Then he descended, and the moonlight found his face, and Alara's breath caught in a way that had nothing to do with pain. He was beautiful. Not beautiful the way Aldrich was beautiful, sharp and golden and bright. This was a different kind of beauty, dark, cool, dangerous, the way a winter storm was beautiful when you watched it from a cliff's edge. Black hair pushed back from a face carved in clean, sharp lines, eyes the color of pale frost, blue-gray, almost silver, set beneath dark brows, a jawline like a blade. A mouth that looked like it had been designed specifically to deliver devastating statements with no warning. He rode a pale gray warhorse, and he moved with the absolute ease of a man who had been born on horseback and had never once in his life been thrown. Behind him, on the ridge, she could see more riders, an escort held back. The wolves stopped. They didn't flee, they simply stopped mid-charge, as if a leash had been pulled taut. Their heads lowered, their tails dropped. One of them whined. The stranger rode down into the snowfield. His pale horse picked its way through the snow with fastidious precision, and the rider's eyes swept the scene. The circling wolves, the blood in the snow, the woman standing alone with a shaking sword, the black warhorse behind her with murder in his eyes. His gaze settled on Alara. He studied her for a moment. The bloody armor, the torn wrist, the defiant stance, the absence of any wolf aura whatsoever. And something shifted in his expression. Not pity. Pity she could have identified and rejected. This was something closer to interest. "They're mine," he said, nodding toward the wolves. "Border Patrol. They were supposed to be tracking a supply convoy." He paused. "Not chasing injured women through snowfields." One of the wolves shifted, bones cracking, fur receding, into a man. He was young, scarred, sheepish. "My lord, she came out of the royal city. We thought—" "I know what you thought. You were wrong." The stranger's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "Fall back, all of you." They fell back. Every wolf, immediately. No hesitation, no argument. This was not the obedience of fear. It was the obedience of absolute authority, the kind that was so certain of itself it never needed to shout. The stranger dismounted. He was tall, taller than Aldrich, with the build of a man who fought regularly and well. He moved toward Alara, and she raised her sword. "Stay back." He stopped. He looked at the sword, then at her wrist, then at the blood soaking through her glove. "Your grip is failing on the right side," he said. "Your wrist is either fractured or badly torn. You've been riding for at least 4 hours in this cold, which means the tissue is swelling inside the wrap, and if you swing that sword one more time, you're going to lose the use of your hand for a month." He paused. "I have a field medic with my escort and horse feed." The mention of horse feed almost undid her. Not for herself, she could have borne any amount of suffering, but Noctis had been carrying her for hours, had fought beside her, had not been fed since Marin's way station. Behind her, Noctis's ears pricked at the word feed. "You're from the border faction," she said. Her voice was flat, assessing. "The Kelrith Wolves." "I'm the lord of the Kelrith Wolves," he said. "Ronan Kelrith." He inclined his head, not a bow, an acknowledgement. "And you are the woman who just fought off 8 of my best hunters with a broken wrist and a horse that appears to be personally offended by the existence of wolves." Noctis snorted. It was his most judgmental snort. Ronan's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. Something better, the suppression of one. "You may leave, or you may stay. Just do not faint in front of my horse." He jerked his chin toward the pale gray warhorse, which was watching the proceedings with an expression of aristocratic boredom. "My horse is very fond of reporting incidents." Alara looked at him. The pain in her chest was a constant roar, and her wrist was on fire, and she was alone on an enemy snowfield talking to a man who should, by all logic, be her adversary. But his eyes were steady, and his voice held no mockery, and he had stopped his wolves without violence. "Do not worry," she said. "I only faint in front of my own horse. It has better manners." This time, Ronan's mouth definitely twitched. Behind her, Noctis did something extraordinary. He lifted his head, looked directly at Ronan, and then turned his body so that he was standing between them, a black wall of horse blocking Ronan's path to Alara entirely. "Your horse," Ronan observed, "does not like me." "My horse doesn't like anyone." "A quality I respect." He stepped to the side. Noctis stepped to block him. He stepped the other way. Noctis mirrored him. This continued for 3 full repetitions, with increasing absurdity, until Noctis leaned forward and clamped his teeth onto the edge of Ronan's cloak. Ronan looked down at the horse holding his cloak hostage. He looked up at Alara. His expression was one of absolute, perfect composure, marred only slightly by the fact that an angry warhorse was slowly eating his clothing. "Is this a negotiation?" he asked. "He thinks so." "What are his terms?" Despite everything, despite the pain, the cold, the ruins of her life, Alara felt the corner of her mouth lift. He wants the feed first, and he doesn't share. Ronan reached slowly into his saddlebag, produced a handful of grain, and held it out. Noctis eyed him, eyed the grain, and released the cloak with a contemptuous flip of his head. He took the grain. He chewed it with the air of a king accepting tribute. "There," Ronan said. "Your bodyguard is appeased. May I approach now, or does the horse require further concessions?" Alara sheathed her sword. The motion made black spots dance across her vision, and she reached for Noctis's saddle to steady herself. Ronan's hand caught her elbow. Not her waist, not her shoulders, her elbow, the most neutral point of contact possible. His fingers were warm through the armor, and his grip was firm without being forceful. "The medic," he said. "Now." She wanted to refuse. She was Alara Voss, the strongest knight in Arventhor, and she did not accept help from enemy lords in snowfields. But Noctis nudged her back, hard, and the world was graying at the edges, and the hollow place where the bond had been was screaming. "Fine," she said. "But if any of your wolves touch my horse, I'll kill them with my left hand." "I believe you," Ronan said, and for the first time she heard something in his voice that sounded genuine. Chapter 4. The Enemy's Hearth. The Kelrith border camp was not what she expected. She had expected a war camp, crude, temporary, designed for aggression. What she found was a mountain stronghold carved into the living rock of the Greymarch Pass, with high walls, warm fires, a well-stocked stable, and the general atmosphere of a community that had been here for generations and intended to remain. Ronan's people watched her with curiosity but not hostility. They were border wolves, harder than the court wolves of Arventhor, weathered by wind and war, but there was none of the cruelty she'd been told to expect. The soldiers nodded at their lord. The camp workers moved with purpose. Children, actual children, darted between the buildings, chasing each other through the snow. Alara had been told her entire life that the Kael'rith faction was savage, lawless, dangerous. She was beginning to suspect that whoever had told her that had never actually visited. Noctis was installed in the stable with the ceremony usually reserved for visiting royalty, primarily because he threatened every groom who approached him until Ilara personally introduced them. Even then, he bit one on the sleeve. Ilara pretended not to notice. Noctis pretended he hadn't done it. The groom pretended his sleeve had always been torn. It was a functional arrangement. The medic, a brisk, efficient woman named Helwyn, examined Alara's wrist with the impersonal competence of someone who had treated 100 such injuries and was bored by this one. Torn ligament, deep bruise on the bone, not fractured, which means you're either very lucky or very hard to break. Helwyn wound a clean bandage with hands that could have performed surgery in a thunderstorm. 3 weeks minimum before you swing a sword. 4 would be better. I'll need it in 2. Then you'll lose the wrist. I'll need it in 2, Alara repeated. Helwyn gave her a look that conveyed in a single glance an entire medical textbook's worth of disapproval. Then she packed the wrist with a poultice that smelled like winter herbs and fire, wrapped it tight, and said, 2 weeks, but if it snaps, don't come crying to me. Alara didn't intend to come crying to anyone. She hadn't cried in 6 years. Ronan appeared after the medic left. He'd removed his riding cloak and wore a dark wool tunic beneath, and in the firelight of the stone chamber, the sharp planes of his face were thrown into relief. He set a tray on the table: bread, dried meat, hot broth, water. When did you last eat? She tried to remember. The morning? No, yesterday morning. She'd been in the saddle since before dawn for the border run that had ended in the ambush, and after the ambush there had been the parade, and after the parade there had been the bridge. Recently, she lied. He studied her. Those frost-pale eyes missed nothing. You're a terrible liar. I suspect that's unusual for someone who survived 10 years in the Arventhor court. I didn't survive by lying. I survived by being useful. And now? She looked at the fire. The hollow in her chest pulsed. Now I'm not useful to anyone. That, Ronan said, pulling a chair to the table and sitting across from her with the easy grace of a man who owned the room and everyone in it, is the most absurd thing I've heard today, and I spent this morning listening to my scout explain how he lost an entire supply convoy to a badger. She looked at him. A badger. A very determined badger. He pushed the tray toward her. Eat. You're no good to anyone dead, and I have questions. She ate. The broth was hot and good, and the bread was better than anything the royal kitchens had produced in months. And the simple act of eating, of being warm, of being fed, of sitting in a place where no one was calling her worthless, was so overwhelming that she had to stop twice and breathe. Ronan watched her. He said nothing. This, she was learning, was one of his qualities. He knew when silence was more useful than speech. When she'd finished, he asked, "Who sent the hunters after you?" "What hunters?" "The wolves in the snowfield. They weren't mine, not the patrol I'd assigned. Someone else deployed them. Someone who knew you'd be on that road tonight." His eyes were sharp. "The Arventhor court isn't known for releasing its assets voluntarily. So who wanted you found?" She considered lying. She considered telling him nothing. But the exhaustion was bone deep, and the truth was simple, and she was so tired of navigating the maze of court deception. "The Council of Elders," she said. "They've been watching me for months. They think my bloodline is abnormal." "Abnormal how?" "I don't have a wolf form." "I noticed." "But they think," she stopped. She didn't actually know what they thought. She only knew that the scrutiny had intensified, that Aldrich had become increasingly desperate to distance himself from her publicly, and that the council's questions had grown pointed enough to draw blood. Ronan leaned back. The firelight played across his features, and she was struck again by how composed he was. Not cold, not emotionless, but contained, as if every reaction was filtered through a layer of deliberate thought. "The Council of Arventhor has a long history of executing things they don't understand," he said. "My grandfather was one of those things." He said it without anger, flat, factual, the way you'd state a historical date. They called him a heretic. They burned his records. They said the Kelrith bloodline was tainted. This is why we're on the border instead of in the court. We weren't exiled for being weak. We were exiled for being inconvenient. Alara looked at him. There was more to this story. She could see it in the careful way he held himself, the measured cadence of his words. But he didn't push, and she recognized a man who would share his history in his own time. "I should leave in the morning," she said. "I'm not safe to be around. If the council tracks me here, then the council will find that crossing the Grey March in winter is considerably more difficult than writing decrees from a warm throne room." He stood. "You can leave in the morning, or you can rest. The room is yours. The stable is Noctis's. And the medic will kill me if you don't sleep at least 6 hours. And she is the only person in this camp I'm genuinely afraid of." He moved toward the door. Something made her speak. "Why are you helping me?" Ronan paused. He didn't turn immediately. When he did, his expression was unreadable. "Because I came to investigate strange movements from the Royal City's army," he said. "And instead I found a woman who was wounded, bond broken, hunted, and still able to leave 8 of my best wolves limping back to camp." He paused. "I'm a strategist, Sir Voss. I don't waste interesting variables." He left. Alara sat by the fire and pressed her hand to the hollow in her chest and wondered when exactly she had stopped being a person and become a variable. It was, she thought, an improvement. Chapter 5. Phantom Pains. She woke before dawn with claws in her chest. Not real claws, the phantom sensation of the broken bond raking across her sternum as if trying to dig its way back to the heart she'd torn it from. The pain was so intense that she rolled off the cot and hit the stone floor, gasping, her back arched, her fingers scrabbling against cold rock. The echo of Aldrich's wolf howled in her ears. Not words. Wolves didn't speak in words, but emotion, raw and ragged. Loss, confusion, the desperate searching of an animal that had been severed from its other half and couldn't understand why. She pressed her forehead to the floor, breathed, counted, waited. It passed. It always passed. But each morning it was a little worse, a little longer, a little louder, and each morning she had to spend a few more seconds reminding herself that she had chosen this, that the alternative, staying, submitting, letting the bond remain as a leash in the hands of a man who called her unworthy, was worse than any phantom pain. She dressed, checked her wrist, swollen, stiff but mobile, went to the stable. Noctis was awake. He was always awake before her, standing in his stall with the alert posture of a horse who believed that sleep was for the weak and that vigilance was the only reasonable response to existence. When she entered, he tossed his head and made a low, rumbling sound that she had learned over the years was his version of concern. She checked his hooves first. Then his legs, the left foreleg, as Marin had warned, showed a slight heat at the fetlock. She wrapped it with practiced hands, murmuring to him as she worked. Then his mane, which was tangled because he fought every groom who tried to brush it. Then his saddle straps. Then his feed. It was the ritual. It had always been the ritual. Take care of the horse first, because the horse would never lie to you about whether it needed help. Marin says hello, she told him, even though Marin hadn't technically said that. She says you're stubborn. Noctis lowered his head and pressed his nose against her hair. His breath was warm and smelled like grain. He stayed there for a long moment, breathing, and she stood very still and let him, because this was the closest either of them came to saying, "I'm worried about you." She found Ronan in the camp's upper ward, standing at a stone parapet overlooking the Grey March Pass. The dawn was coming up gray and silver behind the mountains, and the wind carried the scent of snow. "You're up early," he said, without turning. "The bond wakes me." He did turn then. His eyes, those impossible silver blue eyes, dropped to her chest, not in the way of a man looking at a woman's body, but in the way of a healer locating a wound. The backlash, he said, from the severance. You know about it. I know that severing a fated mate bond is supposed to be impossible. I know that the old texts describe it as tearing the soul in half. I know that the last person recorded to have done it died within a year. He paused. I also know that the old texts were written by the Council of Elders, and the Council has a documented habit of exaggerating threats to discourage people from making choices the Council doesn't approve of. She leaned against the parapet. The stone was ice cold through her shirt. You sound like you've studied this. I've studied everything the Council has tried to hide. It's a hobby. His mouth quirked. A dangerous hobby, which is the best kind. She was quiet for a moment. Below the parapet, the camp was stirring. Smoke from the kitchens, voices, the sound of horses being led to water. Normal sounds, life sounds. She had spent so long in the polished silence of the Arventhor court that she had forgotten what a real, living settlement sounded like. I need to keep moving, she said. If I stay, I put your people at risk. My people have been at risk since before you were born. The Council considers our existence an insult. He turned to face her fully. Where would you go? She didn't answer because she didn't know. For 10 years, her identity had been defined by her role. Sir Alara Voss, Royal Personal Guard, the Crown Prince's blade, the wolfless knight who fought harder than any shifted wolf. Without that role, without the badge, without the bond, she was just a woman with a sword and a bad-tempered horse. The thought should have been terrifying. Instead, it felt like standing in an open field after years in a stone cell. The space was overwhelming, but it was space. I'll figure it out, she said. I don't doubt it. He looked at her with an expression she couldn't entirely read, something between respect and something warmer. But consider this, you're injured, hunted, and alone. I have walls, a medic, and a stable full of feed. You could stay until you're healed, at minimum. Consider it a strategic alliance. An alliance with an enemy lord. An enemy lord who is currently the only person between here and the royal city who hasn't tried to kill you. He paused. The bar is low. I'm aware. She almost laughed. She didn't. The hollow in her chest made laughing feel like pulling stitches, but the impulse was there, and it surprised her. 1 week, she said. Then I go. 1 week, he agreed. She pushed off the parapet and walked toward the stairs. Behind her, Ronan said, Sir Voss. She stopped. In the snowfield, the way you fought, with a broken wrist and no wolf against 8 shifted wolves. His voice was quiet. I've commanded warriors my entire life. I've never seen anything like it. She didn't know what to say to that. She wasn't used to compliments that sounded like they meant something. She went to check Noctis's foreleg again. Chapter 6. The Testing. 3 days passed. Alara trained. She trained because it was the only language she had for processing what had happened to her. Sword forms with her left hand while the right wrist healed. Footwork in the snow. Endurance drills that left her gasping and shaking and momentarily free of the phantom pain. Ronan's soldiers watched her. At first, they watched with the careful hostility of wolves assessing a stranger. By the second day, the hostility had shifted to curiosity. By the third, 2 of them asked to spar. She put them both on the ground in under 40 seconds, left-handed. After that, a young wolf named Brennan, 22, broad-shouldered, freckled, with the eager energy of a puppy who hadn't yet learned to stop chasing his own tail, attached himself to her training sessions like a burr on a saddle blanket. You fight different, Brennan said, sprawled in the snow after she'd swept his legs for the 4th time that morning. Wolves fight with strength. You fight like water. You go around everything. I fight like someone who can't shift, she said. If I fought like a wolf, I'd lose every time, so I don't fight like a wolf. Brennan sat up, brushing snow from his red hair. That's brilliant. That's survival. Same thing, isn't it? He grinned at her, and it was the grin of a young man who was uncomplicated in a world that rewarded complication. straightforward, warm, slightly stupid. She liked him immediately. "You're too nice for a border wolf," she told him. "My mother says the same thing. She says I'm a disgrace to the Kilrith reputation, and I should practice scowling more." He demonstrated a scowl. It looked like a constipated squirrel. Alara kept her face neutral. "Needs work." "Lord Ronan scowls naturally. It's very unfair. Some people just have the face for it." From across the training yard, Ronan's voice carried. "I heard that, Brennan." "I meant it as a compliment, my lord." "It wasn't." Brennan winked at Alara. "He likes you, by the way. I can tell because he hasn't threatened to reassign me to the South Watchtower yet, and he usually does that within the first hour of someone new arriving. He doesn't like me. He's being strategic." "That's what he said the last time someone asked him why he kept your horse in the best stall." Brennan paused. "Your horse bit me, by the way." Brennan flopped back into the snow with a hand over his heart. "If I were less afraid of Lord Ronan, I would propose immediately." Across the yard, Ronan did not look up from tightening a saddle strap. An excellent survival instinct, Brennan. Alara looked from one man to the other. "Was that jealousy?" "No," Ronan said. "Border security. He bites everyone." "He didn't bite Lord Ronan." That was true, and it bothered her. Noctis had, after the initial cloak incident, developed a grudging tolerance for Ronan that he extended to no one else in the camp. He still snorted when Ronan passed his stall. He still tossed his head, but he didn't bite. He didn't kick. Once, she had caught him accepting a carrot from Ronan's hand with an air of tremendous condescension, as if the carrot were barely adequate, but he was willing to deficiencies. "Horses know things," Brennan said sagely. "My grandmother always said that if a horse trusts a man, the man's worth trusting." "Your grandmother never met my horse." On the fourth night, the backlash hit differently. She was walking the camp perimeter. She did this every night, because the habits of a guard didn't die just because the badge had been thrown in the snow, when the pain in her chest erupted without warning. Not the usual dawn ache, but a searing, blinding agony that dropped her to her knees. The Bond remnant was screaming. Aldrich was doing something, reaching through the broken connection, trying to find her, sending his wolf spirit howling into the void between them. She could feel it. His desperation, his fury, his guilt. Not words, but emotions so raw they were almost tangible. He was looking for her. He was using every scrap of the destroyed bond to try to sense where she was. She pressed her hands flat against the frozen ground and breathed through her teeth. The pain was a wolf's jaw clamped around her ribs, tightening with every heartbeat. A hand on her shoulder, warm, steady. "Breathe." Ronan's voice. She hadn't heard him approach. He was kneeling beside her in the snow, his hand a firm pressure on her shoulder, his face close enough that she could see the concern he was trying to mask with composure. "Don't," she started. "I know. Don't touch you. Don't pity you. Don't make it about me." His voice was low and even, the voice of someone who had talked people through pain before. "I'm not doing any of those things. I'm keeping you from falling face first into a snowbank. There's a difference." She laughed. It came out as a gasp, broken and sharp, but it was a laugh, and it cut through the pain just enough to let her breathe. And then something happened that neither of them expected. The pain eased. Not gradually. Suddenly, like a hand had been placed over the wound, the screaming in her chest dimmed, the phantom claws retracted. She could breathe, she could see, she could feel the cold snow under her knees and the weight of Ronan's hand on her shoulder. And beneath that, something else, a vibration, a resonance, as if some frequency inside her was responding to some frequency inside him. Ronan felt it too. She could tell by the way his hand tightened on her shoulder, by the slight hitch in his breathing, by the way his eyes widened a fraction. "What is that?" she whispered. "I don't know." His voice was very careful. "But my wolf just went completely calm, and my wolf is never calm." They looked at each other. The moonlight was cold and blue, and the snow was falling in light, spinning flakes. and his face was very close to hers, and the resonance between them was like a note being held on a string, not painful, not forced, just there. "This doesn't mean anything," she said, pulling back. "Of course not." He stood and offered her his hand. She took it, because the alternative was struggling to her feet alone in the snow and possibly falling over, and she had already performed enough dramatic collapses for 1 week. His grip was warm and firm and lingered exactly 1 second longer than necessary. "For the record," he said as she regained her footing, "my wolf has never done that before. Not for anyone. Maybe your wolf has low standards. My wolf has notoriously high standards. It's insufferable." She pulled her hand from his. The resonance faded, but not entirely. A ghost of it remained, humming in her bones like the memory of warmth. "Good night, Lord Kelrith." "Good night, Sir Voss," he paused. "And Ronan. Just Ronan. Lord Kelrith sounds like my father, and my father was not a pleasant man." "Good night, Ronan." He watched her go. She could feel it, his gaze on her back, steady and warm and impossible to ignore. Chapter 7. The X Arrives. Aldrich came on the 6th day. He came with an escort of 20 Crown Guard wolves, riding the great white warhorse that had been his since his investiture, wearing the black and gold of the royal house and carrying enough authority to make the mountains themselves feel inadequate. He also came, Ilara noticed from the upper parapet where she was training, looking like he hadn't slept in a week. The golden sharpness of his features had gone gaunt, his eyes were shadowed. His jaw was clenched so tight the muscles stood out like ropes. Good, she thought, and then hated herself for thinking it, and then decided she was allowed to think it. Ronan met Aldrich at the gate. The two men faced each other across 6 feet of snow, and the temperature of the camp dropped by several degrees. Not literally, but the effect was convincing. 2 alpha wolves, 2 lords, 2 very handsome men who immediately and instinctively disliked each other. Crown Prince Aldrich. Ronan's voice was the ice-smooth courtesy of a man who could kill you while discussing the weather. "What brings you to the Grey Mark? I wasn't aware the Crown took an interest in our humble border." Aldrich's golden eyes swept the camp, found Ilara on the parapet, locked onto her with an intensity that made the bond remnant throb. "You have something of mine," Aldrich said. The temperature dropped further. Beside Ilara on the parapet, Brennan muttered, "Oh, this is going to be good." Ronan didn't move, didn't blink. "I don't have anything of yours, Your Highness. I have a guest who arrived of her own free will, injured and hunted, and who is welcome to leave whenever she chooses." He paused. "Would you like to specify what you believe you've lost? I keep thorough records." Aldrich dismounted. His wolf was close to the surface. She could see it in the amber flare of his eyes, the way his movements had gone too smooth, too controlled. He walked toward the gate. Ronan did not step aside. "Lord Kelrith." Aldrich's voice was quiet, and that was worse than shouting. Ilara had heard him quiet before. Quiet meant the wolf was in charge. "I am not here to negotiate. I am here for my—" "Your what?" Ronan's voice was silk over steel. "Your guard?" She threw her badge in the snow. "Your mate? From what I understand, you declared her unworthy in front of your entire court. Your property?" One dark eyebrow rose. "I wasn't aware the Crown had started claiming people as possessions. That's an unfortunate regression." Behind Ronan, 2 Kelrith soldiers shifted their weight. Not aggressively, just a reminder that the Lord of the Grey March had backup. Aldrich's jaw worked. "I need to speak with her, alone. Then ask her." Both men looked up at the parapet. Ilara looked down at them. 2 alpha wolves bristling at each other in the snow like overgrown tomcats arguing over territory, and felt the absurd impulse to dump a bucket of water on both of them. Instead, she descended the stairs, walked through the courtyard, and stopped 10 feet from Aldrich. He looked at her. The bond remnant surged, not his emotions anymore because the bond was broken, but the echo of them, the phantom memory of how he used to look at her when they were alone. As if she were the only real thing in a world made of politics and duty. "Ilara." His voice cracked on her name. Your Highness. The formality hit him like a slap. She saw it, the flinch, the way his hands curled at his sides. Don't call me that. Why not? It's your title. You made very clear what titles I'm allowed to use and which ones I'm not. Silence. Behind Aldrich, his soldiers shifted uncomfortably. Behind Alara, Ronan stood perfectly still, watching with the expression of a man who was cataloging everything for future reference. The council has decided to judge you publicly, Aldrich said, and his voice was low and urgent. They've declared your bloodline suspicious. They're calling you a heretic. If they find you, then they'll find me. That's no longer your concern. It is my concern. You are my... What? She took a step closer. The pain in her chest was searing, but she held his gaze with the same steady focus she used on a battlefield. Your guard? Your mate? Your convenient excuse? Pick one, Aldrich. Pick one and say it to my face, the way you said the other thing to my face 6 days ago. He flinched again. You don't understand. I said those things because the council was going to imprison you. They discovered your bloodline is abnormal. They suspect you're the heir to the ancient Moon Wolf line, and they threatened to lock you in the Moon Tower for verification. I thought if I publicly denied you, they'd believe you were unimportant. I was trying to protect. You were trying to protect me, she said. Her voice was even, controlled, the way a blade was controlled before the cut. By humiliating me in front of every person I'd bled, by letting Cordelia call me a hunting dog, by standing there in your crown and your gold and telling the world I was nothing. I didn't say you were nothing. You said I was unworthy. In front of the council, in front of the guard I served for 10 years, in front of soldiers who followed me into battle. She paused. You could have told me. You could have warned me. You could have pulled me aside and said, the council is after you, and I need to pretend, and I need you to play along. You could have given me the choice, but you didn't, because you never once considered that I might have an opinion about my own protection. Aldrich opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Ronan did not step in front of her. He only removed one black glove with unhurried precision. I am not interrupting, he said. I am simply preparing for the possibility that His Highness forgets how distance works. For the first time since arriving at the gate, Aldrich looked at him as if the Border Lord had become a blade pointed directly at his throat. Come back with me, he said. I can still fix this. I can. No. The word landed in the snow between them like a dropped sword. Alara. I said no. You don't get to make this decision for me. Not anymore. She stepped back. Welcome to Moonlit Romance Library. Please follow for more stories. The day Aveline Ashwood's husband came home with a younger Luna, the entire North Hall smelled of roasted venison and betrayal. She knew something was wrong the moment the iron gates groaned open at noon, because Garrick Blackmere never returned early from border campaigns. Garrick liked his wars the way he liked his ale, long, loud, and preferably involving someone else's suffering. For him to cut a 3-month campaign down to 6 weeks meant one of two things. Either the Eastern Wolf clans had surrendered spectacularly, or Garrick had found something more interesting than fighting. Aveline stood at the top of the stone staircase in Ashenmoor Keep, her hands dusted with flour because she had been in the kitchens again. She was always in the kitchens, not because anyone expected the Luna of Blackmere pack to bake bread, but because Aveline had discovered years ago that the kitchen staff were the only people in this entire frozen fortress who did not look at her with pity. My lady. Berta, the head cook, appeared at her elbow, breathless. Berta was 63 years old, built like a wardrobe, and possessed the singular talent of being able to communicate catastrophic news through the angle of her eyebrows alone. Right now, both eyebrows were practically touching her hairline. He's brought someone. He always brings someone. Last time it was 47 prisoners of war and a stolen catapult. It's not a catapult. Is it bigger than a catapult? Berta's mouth pressed into a line so thin it nearly disappeared. It's younger than a catapult. Aveline set down the bread dough. She wiped her hands on her apron slowly, methodically, the way she did everything, not because she was calm, but because she had learned that if she moved slowly enough, people assumed she was in control. She walked to the narrow window that overlooked the main courtyard, and she looked down. Garrick Blackmere rode through the gates on his black warhorse, his dark hair wind-tangled, his jaw sharp enough to cut accusations, his silver-gray eyes catching the winter light in that way that had once made her heart stutter. He was, as always, devastatingly handsome. 6 feet and 4 inches of alpha wolf wrapped in black leather and the unshakable conviction that the world owed him something. Beside him, on a white mare with ribbons braided into its mane, rode a girl. She was perhaps 23, golden-haired, pink-cheeked, wrapped in white furs that looked brand new. She rode with the particular posture of someone who had been told she was precious approximately 400 times that morning. And on her left wrist, Aveline's wolf eyes could see it clearly from this distance, was a Luna binding mark, fresh, still faintly glowing with the amber light of a completed ceremony. "Ah," Aveline said. "My lady. That is a very nice horse she's riding." "My lady, he's bound her. The mark is—" "I can see the mark, Berta." Below, the household guard was assembling. The servants were gathering. Garrick dismounted with the easy grace of a man who expected applause for existing, and then he turned and lifted the golden-haired girl down from her horse with both hands on her waist, and she giggled. She giggled. Aveline had not giggled in approximately 4 years. She was 31 years old, and she had been Garrick's Luna since she was 22. And she had run this household through 2 border wars, a grain famine, a collapsed mine shaft, 3 outbreaks of river fever, and the time the East Tower caught fire because Garrick's beta had tried to roast a whole elk indoors. She had earned every single gray hair that she did not yet have but fully expected by next winter. And now there was a girl in her courtyard wearing her title. "Well," Aveline said, untying her apron and folding it neatly, "I suppose I should go down and introduce myself. It would be rude not to." "My lady, you don't have to." "Berta, if I don't go down there right now, I will have to go down there later, and later I will have had time to think about it, and if I think about it, I will be forced to acknowledge that my husband of 9 years has ridden home with a replacement wife like she's a new pair of boots, and I will feel something about that, and I don't feel like feeling something right now, so I'm going down." She went down. The great stone staircase of Ashenmore Keep had 114 steps. Aveline had counted them during her first week as a new bride, giddy and in love and absolutely certain that Garrick Blackmere was the greatest man alive. She counted them again now. 114 steps between who she had been 5 minutes ago and who she was about to become. The courtyard was full by the time she reached the bottom. Garrick's warriors had dismounted. The household staff had formed their usual receiving line. And there, standing at the center of it all like a painting of a saint who had wandered into the wrong chapel, was the golden-haired girl, clinging to Garrick's arm. Garrick saw Aveline. She watched it happen, the flicker of something in his silver eyes. Not guilt, exactly. Garrick Blackmere did not do guilt. It was more like the brief inconvenience of remembering that you had left a candle burning in a room you no longer intended to use. Aveline. Garrick. This is Lenora. She is the daughter of Lord Voss of Goldenmere. How nice. What is she doing here? Lenora smiled. It was a sweet smile, practiced and perfect, the kind of smile that had probably been rehearsed in a mirror decorated with dried wildflowers. I'm so honored to finally meet you, Lady Ashwood. Garrick has told me so much about. What is she doing here, Garrick? The courtyard went quiet. Even the horses stopped shifting. Garrick straightened. He was taller than Aveline by nearly a foot, and he used that height now the way he always did. Not as a weapon exactly, but as a fact. A reminder that the world was built for men of his size, and everyone else was just borrowing space. Lenora is my mate, he said, my true mate, the bond awakened during the Eastern campaign. I have already completed the Luna binding. There it was. Spoken in front of 50 people, the household guard, the kitchen staff, 2 stable boys and a pigeon that had been sitting on the gate and was now regarding the whole scene with visible judgment. "Your true mate," Aveline repeated. The pull was undeniable. I resisted for weeks, but... Weeks? You resisted for weeks. I know this is difficult. You resisted for weeks. She let the words sit there. We were married for 9 years, Garrick. 9 years. And you resisted this girl for weeks. I'm genuinely impressed by your restraint. Lenora's smile wavered. She looked up at Garrick with wide, uncertain eyes. You said she would understand. She will understand, Garrick said, and his jaw tightened in that way that meant he had already decided how this conversation was going to end and was merely waiting for reality to catch up. Aveline looked at him, really looked at him, at the face she had kissed 10,000 times, at the hands she had held through nightmares, at the man she had believed was her home. She did not cry. She had cried exactly once in her marriage. The night their first and only pregnancy had ended at 3 months, and she had bled alone in their bed because Garrick had been at a council meeting and no one had wanted to interrupt him. She had decided after that night that crying was a currency she could not afford to spend on people who would not value it. You're right, she said. I understand perfectly. Then she turned to Lenora and she smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of a woman who had balanced 9 years of household accounts, negotiated grain prices with merchants who thought female Lunas were decorative, and once physically carried a wounded border scout 6 miles through snow because the patrol wagon had broken an axle. Lady Lenora, welcome to Ashenmore Keep. I'll have the servants prepare a room for you. The East Tower is lovely this time of year. The roof leaks only when it rains, but it almost never rains here, so you should be fine. She looked back at Garrick. Except it's winter, and winter means snow, and snow melts. So I suppose the roof will leak constantly, but I'm sure your true mate is very resilient. Then she walked back inside. She made it all the way to the kitchen before her hands started shaking. Berta was waiting. Berta was always waiting. The old cook took one look at Aveline's face and said nothing, because Berta was the kind of woman who understood that sometimes the most compassionate thing you could do for someone was to simply witness their composure without testing it. I need to leave, Aveline said. Yes, my lady. Tonight? Yes, my lady. He'll try to keep me here, for appearances. The pack expects a proper transition of Luna status, and Garrick won't want the Northern Territories to think he discarded his Luna without cause. He'll want me to stay and smile and hand Lenora the household keys in some ridiculous ceremony so it all looks civilized. Then we don't give him the chance. No, we don't. Aveline's mind was already working. She had always been like this. She felt things deeply, but processed them practically. Heartbreak could wait. Logistics could not. I'm taking the ledgers, she said. The household ledgers? All of them. 9 years of accounts, grain contracts, trade agreements, mine yields, border patrol rotations, and the tax reconciliation files. I wrote them. I organized them. They're in my handwriting because no one else in this keep bothered to learn double-entry bookkeeping. Without those ledgers, Garrick won't know how much grain is stored, how much is owed to Goldenmere, or when the next shipment of iron is due. Berta stared at her. Then a slow, magnificent grin spread across the cook's weathered face. You brilliant girl. Also, I'm taking the spice cabinet. The saffron alone is worth more than Lenora's horse. I purchased every ounce of it with my personal dowry funds. It's mine. Berta laughed. It was a low, dangerous laugh, the laugh of a woman who had survived 3 husbands and trusted none of them. What else? Aveline considered. My mother's silver, my books. The winter medicine stores, I compounded them myself, so they're mine, and the cheese. The cheese? The aged Firewolf cheese in the cold cellar. 42 wheels. I spent 3 years perfecting that recipe. Garrick doesn't even like cheese. He won't miss it until his new Luna tries to host a feast and realizes there's nothing in the larder but salted pork and regret. By evening, Aveline had packed 14 crates. She had done it quietly, efficiently, with the help of Berta and 2 kitchen maids who had volunteered without being asked, because it turned out that the household staff had opinions about Garrick's romantic decisions, and none of those opinions were favorable. The problem was leaving. Ashenmore Keep sat on a rocky plateau surrounded by pine forest on 3 sides and a sheer cliff drop on the 4th. The main gate was guarded, the postern gate was locked at sundown, and Garrick, for all his emotional failures, was not stupid. He would expect her to try to leave, and he would have instructed the guards to prevent it, not out of love, but because a discarded Luna wandering the northern roads was politically inconvenient. Aveline was standing at the kitchen window, considering her options, when she heard the noise. It came from the old granary behind the keep, a low, rumbling sound, half growl and half whimper. She knew that sound. She had heard it before, on border patrols, in the deep forests. It was the sound of a wolf. Not a shifter wolf, not a pack wolf, but a real wolf, a wild one. She should not have gone to investigate. She had 14 crates to move, a keep to escape, and a rapidly narrowing window of time before Garrick decided to summon her for whatever humiliating conversation he was surely planning. But the sound was wrong. It was pain-wrong, and Aveline had never been able to walk away from pain-wrong sounds, which was how she had ended up married to Garrick in the first place, because 9 years ago she had heard a wounded soldier howling in the rain and had gone to help him, and the wounded soldier had turned out to be the most handsome alpha she had ever seen, and he had looked at her like she was the only warm thing in a cold world, and she had loved him. She had loved him so much. She went to the granary. The wolf was silver, not gray, not pale. Silver, like moonlight, had been hammered into fur. It was enormous, easily twice the size of a natural wolf, with eyes that shone the pale blue of glacier ice. It was also very clearly injured. Its left hind leg was caught in an old iron trap, one of the cruel, spring-loaded things that Garrick's father had set decades ago, and no one had bothered to remove. The wolf snarled when it saw her. "I know," Aveline said. "I wouldn't trust me either. Everything in this keep has terrible judgment." She approached slowly. She had done this before, not with wolves this large, but with injured animals in the forest. The key was to make yourself boring, unthreatening, the kind of creature that clearly did not have the ambition to be a predator. "I'm going to look at that trap," she said, keeping her voice level. "And then I'm going to open it, and then you're going to not bite my hand off because I need my hands. I have 14 crates of cheese and spices to load onto a cart tonight, and it's really hard to drive a cart with stumps." The wolf watched her. Its ice blue eyes tracked her every movement with an intelligence that was not entirely animal. Aveline knelt beside the trap. It was rusted, but still brutally functional. The iron jaws had bitten deep enough to draw blood, but not deep enough to break bone. She studied the mechanism. She knew these traps. She had spent her first year as Luna systematically disarming them across Blackmere territory because she thought they were barbaric, and Garrick had let her because it had not seemed important enough to argue about. "This is going to hurt," she told the wolf. "I'm sorry." She pressed the release lever with both hands. The jaws opened. The wolf yelped, a sound that was far too dignified to be called a yelp, but there was no other word for it, and yanked its leg free. Then it just sat there, looking at her. "You're welcome," Aveline said. "Now please go away. I have a dramatic escape to execute, and I don't have time for a wildlife encounter." The wolf did not go away. It licked its injured paw, then stood, testing its weight. It limped, but it walked. It looked at Aveline with those impossible glacier eyes, and then it looked at the keep, and then it looked back at Aveline. Then it lay down across the granary doorway. "You're not helping." It yawned. Its teeth were very large. "Fine, guard the door. That's useful. I'm going to go be publicly humiliated now, and then I'm going to steal my own cheese and leave. If anyone asks, you didn't see me." She left the wolf in the granary. She had larger problems. The summons came at dusk. A servant, not one of the loyal kitchen staff, but one of Garrick's personal attendants, a thin man named Harwick who had the personality of a damp sock, knocked on Aveline's chamber door, and informed her that the Alpha required her presence in the Great Hall. "Required," Aveline repeated. "His word, my lady." Of course it was. She dressed carefully. Not in the plain wool she usually wore for kitchen work, but in the one fine gown she owned, deep midnight blue with silver thread at the cuffs, the gown she had sewn herself for last winter's solstice feast. She braided her dark auburn hair and pinned it with her mother's silver combs. She did not do this for Garrick. She did it for herself, because she understood that in the next hour her dignity was going to be tested, and dignity was easier to maintain when you felt like you looked like someone who deserved it. The Great Hall of Ashenmore Keep was a massive stone room with a vaulted ceiling supported by pillars carved to look like wolves standing on their hind legs. Garrick sat in the Alpha's chair on the raised dais at the far end, and Lenora sat beside him in a smaller chair that had been hastily draped with white silk. That chair had been Aveline's. She had sat in it for 9 years. She walked the length of the hall. Every step echoed. The pack was assembled, warriors, elders, household staff. They watched her with expressions ranging from sympathy to discomfort to the specific blank-faced neutrality of people who knew something was wrong, but were not personally willing to do anything about it. "Aveline," Garrick said, and he had the decency to look uncomfortable, though whether that was actual guilt or just the social inconvenience of explaining to a room full of people why he had replaced a perfectly functional wife, she could not tell. "Please sit." There was no chair for her. "Where?" she asked. The silence was surgical. Garrick's beta, a barrel-shaped man named Griff, who had the emotional intelligence of a fence post but at least the honesty of one, shifted his weight and muttered something that might have been a curse. "A chair," Garrick snapped at a servant. "Bring a chair." They brought a chair, a small wooden one, the kind used by scribes, and they set it below the dais, not on the platform. Below it. Below Garrick. Below Lenora. Aveline looked at the chair. She looked at Garrick. She did not sit. "You have something to say to me," she said. "Say it standing." A low male voice came from the Western delegation near the rear doors. "Then standing is the only honest position left in this hall." Aveline turned. 12 riders in silver-edged cloaks stood beneath the carved wolf pillars, road dust still whitening their boots. At their center was a black-haired man in a closed black coat, taller than Garrick and unnervingly still. He wore no crown and no pack crest, only a narrow silver clasp shaped like a wolf fang. He had arrived at noon as a Western road envoy, and until that moment he had said nothing. Garrick's expression hardened. "This is a private pack matter." "You summoned the full household, 2 visiting lords and foreign witnesses," the stranger replied. His pale eyes moved once to the scribe's stool below the dais, then returned to Aveline. "It stopped being private when you removed your Luna's chair." He did not step in front of her. He did not offer to speak for her. He merely stayed where she could see him, a silent witness whose attention held no pity. For the first time that evening, Aveline felt observed without feeling diminished. Garrick's jaw worked. She knew that look. It was the look he got when reality was not performing according to his expectations. "The bond between Lenora and me is a true mate bond," he said. "It cannot be denied. Pack law recognizes." "I know what pack law recognizes, Garrick. I rewrote half of it. That a true mate bond supersedes a ceremonial marriage. When confirmed by the Pack Elder Council, witnessed by 3 neutral alphas, and recorded in the Sovereignty Ledger, which I also maintain, none of which has happened." Garrick's eyes narrowed. "It will happen." "Then let it happen properly. But you didn't call me here to discuss procedure, did you?" Lenora leaned forward. She had changed into a white gown embroidered with gold, probably from the Keep's own textile stores, which Aveline had stocked herself. And she had the expression of someone who was trying very hard to appear gracious, and was mostly just appearing nervous. "Lady Ashwood," Lenora said, "I want you to know that I never intended to." "To what? Take my husband? Take my title? Take my chair?" "I know this must be painful." What's painful is that you're wearing a gown made from fabric I imported from the southern weavers at a rate of 12 silver marks per bolt, and you've cut the hem crooked." Lenora looked down at her hem. It was, in fact, crooked. Aveline turned back to Garrick. "What are your terms?" "You'll be given quarters in the East Tower. The tower with the leaking roof. And you'll retain the courtesy title of Lady Ashwood." "How generous! A leaking tower and a fake name. And you'll participate in the formal transition ceremony where you'll transfer the Luna Seal to Lenora in front of the pack." The Luna Seal. It was a medallion of dark iron, stamped with the Blackmere wolf, worn by every Luna of the pack for generations. Aveline had worn it for 9 years. She reached up and touched it now, feeling the cool metal against her collarbone. "You want me to hand my seal to this girl, in public, and smile. I want you to do it with grace, Aveline. You've always had grace." "Grace," she repeated. "You want me to have grace?" She looked at him, at this man she had loved since she was 22, this man whose nightmares she had soothed, whose wounds she had stitched, whose household she had held together with nothing but stubbornness and double-entry bookkeeping. She looked at the silver in his eyes and remembered when those eyes had looked at her like she was the only thing worth seeing. "All right," she said. "When is the ceremony?" 3 days. 3 days. Fine. She paused. "But Garrick?" "Yes. You should know that I've taken the household ledgers." The room shifted. Garrick's expression changed. "All of them," she continued. "Grain stores, trade contracts, mine yields, tax reconciliations, patrol rotations, every record of how this keep functions. I wrote them. They're mine." "Aveline." "Also the spice cabinet and the aged Firewolf cheese. 42 wheels. I'd say I'm sorry, but I spent 3 years perfecting that recipe while you were off deciding which wars to start, so I'm not even a little bit sorry." Griff, the beta, made a choking sound that might have been a laugh. He turned it into a cough. "You can't take the ledgers," Garrick said, standing. "Those are pack property. They're written in my personal cipher. Nobody else can read them, which means they're either my property or they're very expensive kindling. Your choice." Lenora looked between them with the expression of someone who had just realized that the fairy tale she had walked into had footnotes she had not read. "I'll give you the ledger cipher key," Aveline said. "When I am released from this marriage with my full dowry restored, my mother's silver returned, and a formal letter of good standing signed by you and witnessed by 3 neutral alphas. Until then, I hope Lenora is good at arithmetic, because winter tax season starts in 6 weeks, and the northern mines will want their yield reports." She turned and walked out of the great hall. Behind her, she heard Garrick say, "Aveline," and she did not stop. She did not stop until she reached the granary, where the silver wolf was still lying across the doorway, and then she sat down on an overturned bucket, and she pressed her hands over her face, and she breathed. The wolf lifted its head and watched her. "Don't look at me like that," she said, her voice cracking exactly once. "I'm fine." The wolf stood. It limped over to her on its injured paw and pressed its enormous silver head against her knee. Its fur was surprisingly warm. It smelled like pine sap and cold stone, and something else, something sharp and electric, like the air before a lightning strike. She put her hand on the wolf's head. She did not cry. But she sat there for a long time, with her hand on a wild animal's silver fur, and she breathed, and she planned. 3 days, Garrick had said. She would be gone in 1. The escape happened at the 3rd bell past midnight. Berta had arranged a cart. Not one of the fine ones from the Keep's carriage house, but a sturdy farm cart from the village below, driven by Berta's nephew Tam, a lanky 19-year-old with perpetually startled hair and the useful quality of asking no questions about anything ever. "Where are we going?" Tam asked. "South," Aveline said. "How far south?" "Far enough that Garrick Blackmere's name is a boring fact and not a present danger." "That's very far south. Then I hope this horse is well rested." They loaded the crates in silence. 14 crates of ledgers, spices, medicine, cheese, silver, and books. Everything Aveline owned, everything she had earned. Her entire life in Ashenmoor. Keep reduced to what could fit on a farm cart. The silver wolf appeared as they were finishing. It materialized from the tree line like a patch of moonlight that had decided to go for a walk, and it sat at the edge of the clearing and watched them with those glacier blue eyes. "No," Aveline said. The wolf tilted its head. "I am not adopting a wild wolf. I have enough problems." The wolf stood up and walked to the cart and lay down underneath it. You can't just..." Tam looked at the wolf, looked at Aveline. "It seems decided, my lady." "It's a wild animal." "It seems like a decided wild animal." They left. The postern gate had been locked, as Aveline had expected, but Berta had one final gift, the key. She had taken it from Harwick's belt while he was eating supper, because Berta had the hands of a pickpocket and the moral flexibility of a woman who had watched her mistress be humiliated in front of 50 people. "Go," Berta said, pressing the key into Aveline's hand. "Don't stop until you're past the river crossing, and don't come back for that man, not if he begs on both knees." "Berta, don't you dare cry, not for him. You cry when you're somewhere warm and safe and eating your own cheese, and not a moment before." Aveline hugged her. Berta was not a hugger. She tolerated the embrace the way she tolerated overcooked meat, with stiff disapproval and a faint tremor that suggested hidden emotion. But she hugged Aveline back. "Go," she said again. They went. The cart rattled down the mountain road in the dark. Tam drove. Aveline sat beside him, wrapped in her cloak, the Luna seal still around her neck. She had considered leaving it. She had held it in her hand and looked at it, and thought about setting it on Garrick's pillow with a note that said something cutting and memorable. But she did not leave it, not because she wanted to keep it, but because she had earned it, and she was done leaving behind things she had earned. The silver wolf trotted alongside the cart. Its limp was improving. In the moonlight, its fur shone like liquid metal, and its glacier eyes caught every shadow, every movement, every rustle in the dark pines. It moved with the particular alertness of an animal that was not following, it was escorting. They traveled south for 3 days. On the first day, they crossed the Blackmere border into unclaimed territory, the vast, lawless stretch of pine forests and rocky valleys between the northern wolf packs and the Silver Reaches. Tam drove the cart with the grim determination of a young man who had been raised by Berta and therefore feared nothing in the known world except his aunt's displeasure. Aveline navigated from memory because she had spent years studying the maps in Ashenmoor Keep's library, while Garrick had been too busy being alpha to notice that his wife had memorized every road, river, and border crossing in the Northern Territories. On the second day, they ran into bandits. There were 5 of them. They emerged from the trees at a narrow point in the road where the pines pressed close and the cart could not turn around. They were the usual sort, rough, unwashed, armed with short swords, and the misplaced confidence of men who had never met a woman who could lift a grain sack over her head with one arm. Aveline could lift a grain sack over her head with one arm. "Off the cart," the lead bandit said. He was missing 2 teeth and most of his charm. "Leave the cargo." Aveline looked at him. She looked at the cart full of her possessions. She looked at the wheel of Firewolf cheese that was sitting on top of the nearest crate, aged to perfection, worth approximately 40 silver marks at market. "No," she said. The bandit blinked. "That wasn't a request." "I know. My answer is still no." The silver wolf, which had been trotting ahead of the cart, came back. It walked out of the trees with the silent, deliberate gait of a predator that had been politely waiting for an excuse. It was enormous in the daylight, shoulder height to a man's chest, teeth like ivory daggers, glacier eyes fixed on the lead bandit with the focused intensity of a creature that had already done the math and decided that 5 against 1 was unfair, but only for the 5. The bandits looked at the wolf. The wolf looked at the bandits. The lead bandit looked at Aveline. "Is that yours?" I really couldn't say. It followed me home. I think it likes cheese. The wolf growled. It was not a dramatic growl. It was a low, continuous rumble like a mountain clearing its throat before an avalanche. The sound vibrated in the bones. The bandits left. They did not run, they were too proud for that, but they walked very quickly in the opposite direction, which was essentially the same thing with better posture. Tam exhaled. My lady, your wolf just scared off 5 armed men. It's not my wolf. The wolf walked back to the cart and lay down underneath it again. It seems like your wolf. On the 3rd day, they reached Brindlewood. Brindlewood was not a town so much as a collection of buildings that had agreed to stand near each other. A trading post, a blacksmith, a tavern called the Crooked Antler, and a scattering of stone cottages clinging to the hillside like determined barnacles. It sat at the crossroads where the northern road met the old King's Highway, and it was the kind of place where people came to disappear. Aveline did not intend to disappear. She intended to regroup, resupply, and formulate a plan that extended beyond go south. But first, she needed information, and information lived in taverns. The Crooked Antler was warm, dim, and smelled of wood smoke and spilled ale. The proprietress was a tall, sharp-faced woman named Marin, who had the look of someone who had seen everything and was disappointed by most of it. Looking for a room? Marin asked, wiping down the bar with a cloth that had probably been white sometime during the previous century. Looking for news, Aveline said. What's happening in the territories? Any major pack movements? Marin studied her. Aveline was still wearing her midnight blue gown, travel-stained now, and her mother's silver combs, and the Luna seal around her neck. She did not look like a refugee. She looked like a Luna who had decided to go for a very long walk. You're from Blackmere, Marin said. I was. Heard something about that? Alpha Blackmere took a new Luna? News travels fast. Merchants talk, especially when they're drunk. Marin leaned on the bar. Lot of unrest in the territories right now. The Silver Reaches have been quiet for years, but the new Silver Wolf King took his throne about 2 years back. He's been consolidating the western packs. Rumor is he's building something. Army, alliance, nobody knows. But the northern alphas are nervous, Blackmere included. The Silver Wolf King, Aveline repeated. She had heard the title. Everyone had. The Silver Reaches were a vast territory to the west, historically fractured, historically weak. But 2 years ago, a new king had emerged. A wolf of unknown lineage who had united the Western Pacts through a combination of military brilliance, political cunning, and what the rumors described as an unsettling amount of personal charisma. Nobody knew much about him. He did not attend councils. He did not send emissaries to social functions. He was, by all accounts, a ghost who happened to command the largest wolf army west of the mountains. The Silver Wolf King doesn't concern me, Aveline said. I need to find work, something that uses organizational skills and an extremely detailed knowledge of northern trade routes. Marin raised an eyebrow. You're a bookkeeper? I'm a Luna who ran a keep for 9 years. I can do accounts, negotiate trade contracts, manage provision routes, mediate territorial disputes, compound medicines, bake bread, and disarm iron traps. I can also lift a grain sack over my head with one arm, but I prefer to lead with the bookkeeping. Marin smiled. It was a thin, surprised smile, the smile of a woman who had not expected to be impressed and was annoyed at herself for it. There's a position, she said. Not here, north of here, actually. The border garrison at Thornwall, it's a neutral outpost, sits right on the line between unclaimed territory and the Silver Reaches. They need a quartermaster. The last one embezzled the supply funds and ran off with a traveling bard. A quartermaster position at a border garrison. It's not glamorous, but it's legitimate work, and the garrison commander doesn't care about pack politics. They just need someone who can count barrels and not steal from them. Aveline considered. A border garrison was not where she had imagined ending up, but it was work. It was far from Ashenmoor, and it was the kind of position where her skills would actually be valued rather than taken for granted. "I'll take it," she said. "You haven't even asked about the pay. Does it come with quarters that don't have a leaking roof?" "Stone cottage, dry, comes with a fireplace." "Then I'll take it." She left Brindlewood the next morning with Tam, the cart, and the silver wolf. Hayes had spent the night beneath the tavern eaves, waking at every wagon wheel an unfamiliar scent. At sunrise it rose, shook frost from its coat, and followed the cart without invitation. The road to Thornwall wound through increasingly wild terrain. The pines grew taller, the valleys grew deeper. The air tasted of snow and granite, and the particular silence that came from being very far away from anyone who might help you. It was on this road that Aveline met the black-haired Western witness from Ashenmore again. He stepped from the pines alone this time, without the 12 silver-cloaked riders who had stood behind him in the Great Hall. Aveline recognized the disciplined stillness before she recognized his face. Men did not walk alone in the borderlands unless they were foolish or dangerous, and nothing about him suggested foolishness. His pale eyes took in the farm cart, the travel-stained gown, the 14 crates, and the silver wolf pacing beside her horse. "You left before dawn," he said. "You watched my husband remove my chair and said almost nothing. You did not need a stranger to win the argument for you." His gaze stayed level with hers. "You needed someone powerful enough to remember exactly what they did after everyone else decided it was more convenient to forget." The answer should have irritated her. Instead, it settled somewhere uncomfortably close to relief. Then he glanced at the horse and his expression sharpened. Aveline blinked. He was beautiful, not handsome in the way Garrick was handsome, sharp and aggressive and designed to impress. This man was beautiful the way a storm was beautiful, the way a blade was beautiful, the way something dangerous was beautiful, precisely because it did not care whether you found it beautiful or not. His eyes were pale gray, almost silver, set in a face with cheekbones that could have been carved by a sculptor who was showing off. He wore dark leather and fur, practical, well-made, but not ornamental. No insignia, no pack markings, nothing to identify him. He stopped in the middle of the road and looked at the cart. Then he looked at Aveline. Then he looked at the silver wolf, which had been trotting beside the cart and was now standing very still, its glacier eyes fixed on the stranger with an expression that Aveline could not read. The wolf did not growl. It did not snarl. It did not flatten its ears or bare its teeth. It simply stood there and looked at the man, and the man looked back at it, and something passed between them that Aveline did not understand. Then the man looked at her again. "Your horse is about to throw a shoe," he said. His voice was low and quiet, the kind of voice that did not need volume because it had weight, the kind of voice that entered a room and made other voices seem optional. Aveline looked at the horse. The right front shoe was indeed loose, the nails were bending, and the shoe was shifting with each step. She had not noticed. She should have noticed. She was better than this. "Thank you," she said. "I'll fix it at the next stop." "The next stop is Thornwall. That's 4 miles uphill. Your horse won't make it 4 miles on a loose shoe on this terrain." "Then I'll fix it here." She climbed down from the cart. She had tools, a basic farrier kit that Berta had packed because Berta thought of everything. She knelt beside the horse and examined the shoe. The nails were bent, the shoe was warped, and the hoof needed trimming. It was a 20-minute job if you knew what you were doing. Aveline knew what she was doing. She had learned farriery during the grain famine when the keep's blacksmith had died of river fever and no one else had been willing to learn. The stranger watched her. He did not offer to help. Most men would have. Most men would have shouldered in and taken the tools from her hands and done the job themselves because most men assumed that a woman kneeling beside a horse was a woman who needed rescuing. This man simply leaned against a tree and watched her with those pale silver eyes, and the thing she felt from him was not condescension, it was interest. "You're good at that," he said, after she had removed the warped shoe and begun trimming the hoof. "I'm good at most things." "That's not arrogance." That's inventory. She looked up at him. He was not smiling, but there was something at the corner of his mouth. Not quite amusement, not quite warmth, but something that lived in the neighborhood of both. "Who are you?" she asked. "A traveler. Travelers don't walk alone in the borderlands. Some do. Stupid ones. You're traveling with a farm cart, a boy, and a wolf. I wouldn't call that a full military escort." The wolf is very intimidating. He looked at the wolf. The wolf was currently lying on its side in a patch of sunlight, its injured paw in the air, its tongue hanging out. It looked approximately as intimidating as a large silver throw pillow. "Terrifying," the man said. Aveline felt her mouth twitch. She pressed it down. She was not in the mood to find strange men in the forest amusing. She had recently been replaced by a 23-year-old with a crooked hem, and her sense of humor was on temporary leave. She finished the hoof, fitted a spare shoe from the farrier kit, and nailed it into place. It was not her best work. She did not have a proper anvil, but it would hold to Thornwall. "Thank you for the warning about the shoe," she said, standing and brushing off her skirts. "You're going to Thornwall?" "I am." "The garrison?" "The garrison." He was quiet for a moment. Those pale eyes studied her. Not the way Garrick had studied her, which was the way a man studied something he owned, but the way a cartographer studied a coastline, with attention and a certain careful distance. "The road forks in half a mile," he said. "Take the left fork. The right one looks shorter, but crosses a washout that'll break your axle." "How do you know this road so well?" "I walk it." "Alone?" "Alone." She looked at him, and he looked at her, and there was a moment, a brief, electric moment like the air before a lightning strike when something shifted. She did not know what it was. She only knew that this man was looking at her like she was not a discarded Luna, not a woman who had been replaced, not a problem to be managed or a chair to be removed from a dais. He was looking at her like she was a person who had just reshot a horse in the middle of nowhere, and that was interesting. "Thank you," she said again, "for the road advice." He inclined his head, just slightly, a nod of respect, not of dismissal. Then he turned and walked back into the forest, and the trees closed behind him like a curtain, and he was gone. Tam stared after him. "My lady, who was that?" "I don't know." He was very tall. "Yes." "And very intense." "Yes." "Do you think he was dangerous?" Aveline considered this. The silver wolf had stood up from its sunlit nap and was staring into the trees where the man had disappeared. Its tail was not tucked. Its ears were not flattened. If anything, it looked almost expectant. "Yes," Aveline said. "I think he was very dangerous, and I think he was very polite about it." Thornwall Garrison was built into the side of a cliff. It was not a beautiful building. It was a practical building. Thick stone walls, narrow windows, a heavy iron gate, and the general aesthetic of a structure that had been designed by someone who expected to be attacked and wanted the building to look disappointed about it in advance. The garrison commander was a woman named Captain Lyra Dane, who was, Aveline did a quick calculation, probably no older than 35, but looked like she had personally wrestled every one of those years and won. She was short, muscular, with close-cropped dark hair and a scar across her left cheekbone that she wore with the casual indifference of someone who had more interesting things to think about than her own face. "You're the new quartermaster?" Lyra said, looking Aveline up and down. "I am." "You look like a Luna." "I was." "Blackmere?" "Does everyone know?" "Merchant gossip. It's the only entertainment out here." Lyra gestured at the garrison. "This is Thornwall. We have 40 soldiers, a storage problem, a provision route that hasn't worked properly since the last quartermaster stole everything, and a strategic position on the border of the Silver Reaches that makes us either very important or very expendable, depending on who you ask." "Who do you ask?" I try not to ask anyone anything. It's easier that way. Lyra looked at the cart. Is that cheese? 42 wheels of aged Firewolf cheese. Firewolf cheese! I made it myself. Lyra's expression shifted from professional assessment to something that looked dangerously close to hope. Can you cook? I can do many things, but I'm here to be your quartermaster, not your chef. Can you be both? Captain Voss, I can be whatever this garrison needs me to be, as long as I am paid fairly, housed in quarters with a roof that does not leak, and never, under any circumstances, asked to hand my professional accomplishments to a younger woman while smiling. Lyra blinked, then she laughed. It was a short, sharp laugh, the laugh of someone who did not laugh often and was surprised to find herself doing it. Welcome to Thornwall, Lady Ashwood. Aveline, just Aveline. Welcome to Thornwall, Aveline. Your quarters are in the east wing. The roof doesn't leak, the fireplace works, and if you can fix our provision route, I'll personally fight anyone who bothers you. Aveline moved in. The stone cottage attached to the east wing was small but solid, a single room with a fireplace, a bed with an actual mattress, a desk, and a window that overlooked the valley below. She unpacked her crates with the systematic efficiency of a woman who had done this before and intended to do it only one more time, because the next place she unpacked would be permanent. The silver wolf followed her into the cottage, sniffed every corner with great thoroughness, and then lay down in front of the fireplace and fell asleep. You live here now, Aveline said to the wolf. Apparently. The wolf's tail thumped once against the stone floor. She named it Haze because its silver fur blurred against morning mist. She did not pretend it was tame. It slept near the door rather than the hearth, woke at every unfamiliar scent, and left for hours to range the tree line before returning on its own terms. Tam stopped calling it a pet after Hayes ignored him for an entire day and then stole only the strip of meat he had been saving for himself. Very wild, Tam said, extremely untamed. Shut up, Tam. Aveline threw herself into the quartermaster work with the single-minded intensity of a woman who needed to not think about her ex-husband. The garrison's supply situation was, as Lyra had warned, catastrophic. The previous quartermaster had embezzled roughly 60% of the supply budget, falsified the inventory records, and left behind a filing system that appeared to have been organized by a drunk badger. This is chaos, Aveline said, staring at a ledger that listed 40 barrels of salt in storage. The actual storage room contained 6 barrels of salt, 2 barrels of what might once have been salt but was now a mysterious gray substance, and a family of mice. Welcome to my life, Lyra said. How have you been feeding 40 soldiers? Badly, and with a lot of hunting. My soldiers eat more venison than any garrison in the territories. They're starting to dream about deer. That ends now. Aveline rolled up her sleeves. I need access to the garrison's trade accounts, your existing supplier contracts. If any survived the embezzlement, the regional merchant registry, and a complete physical inventory of every storage room, cellar, and closet in this building. Lyra stared at her. You want to inventory every closet? I once found 14 pounds of missing saffron in a broom cupboard in Ashenmore Keep. You would be amazed at what people hide in closets. Within a week, Aveline had rebuilt the inventory system from scratch. Within 2 weeks, she had renegotiated 3 supplier contracts, secured a new grain source from a farming community 2 valleys south, and discovered that the garrison's armory budget had been paying for a subscription to a traveling theater troupe that the previous quartermaster had apparently been very fond of. A theater troupe, Lyra said flatly. The Wandering Wolves. They perform romantic ballads and dramatic reenactments of famous pack battles. Your former quartermaster was paying them 12 silver marks a month to perform private shows. Private shows. In the supply cellar, which explains why the cellar always smelled like stage makeup. Lyra pressed her hands over her face. I am going to find that man, and I am going to make him eat every script. The garrison soldiers, who had been surviving on venison and suspicion, responded to Aveline's arrival with the cautious optimism of people who had been disappointed before but were willing to try hope one more time. She reorganized the kitchen. She fixed the bread oven, which had a cracked firebox that no one had bothered to repair because no one had bothered to bake bread. She introduced the firewolf cheese, which caused a minor sensation. The soldiers had never tasted anything like it, and one of them, a young woman named Petra, who was built like a siege engine and had the most infectious laugh in the garrison, actually cried. "This is the best thing I've ever eaten," Petra said, tears streaming down her face. "It's cheese," Aveline said. "It's the best cheese. It's cheese that understands me." Petra became Aveline's first real friend at Thornwall. She was 24, the daughter of a blacksmith from the Eastern Valleys, and she had joined the garrison because, in her words, "I wanted to hit things professionally, and the garrison was hiring." She was loud, warm, fearless, and possessed of a laugh that could be heard 3 rooms away and made everyone in those 3 rooms feel better about their lives. The other person who attached herself to Aveline was Nessa, the garrison's healer, a quiet, precise woman of about 40 with steady hands, gray-streaked dark hair, and the particular calm of someone who had seen a lot of blood and had decided to respond to it with competence rather than panic. Nessa did not talk much, but when she did, every word counted, and she had a dry, understated humor that surfaced at unexpected moments like a fish in a still pond. "Your wolf is in my herb garden again," Nessa said one morning, appearing at Aveline's door with the expression of a woman who was trying to be annoyed and failing. "It's not my wolf. It ate my chamomile." "Wolves don't eat chamomile." "This one does. It also dug up my valerian root and rolled in it. My entire herb garden smells like a wolf who is having a very relaxing day." Hayes adjusted to the garrison without becoming a house animal. It slept where it could see both the door and the window, followed Aveline only when strangers entered, and patrolled the outer wall at dusk. Once it dug through Nessa's chamomile bed while tracking a vole and rolled in the crushed leaves afterward, smelling so strongly of herbs that even the sentries kept sneezing. Its protection was instinctive rather than obedient. It placed itself between Aveline and danger, but it did not wait for commands. 3 weeks after Aveline arrived at Thornwall, the stranger from the forest appeared again. She was in the garrison courtyard, arguing with a merchant about the price of lamp oil. The merchant wanted 6 silver marks per barrel, Aveline wanted 4, and they had been negotiating for 20 minutes with the intensity of 2 people who both knew the fair price was 5, but were too stubborn to say it first when she saw him. He was standing at the garrison gate. Just standing there, leaning against the stone wall with his arms crossed, watching her negotiate with an expression that was carefully, deliberately blank except for his eyes, which were not blank at all. Those pale silver eyes were watching her with a focus that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. He was dressed differently than before, still dark leather and fur, but cleaner, more deliberate, as if he had actually considered what to wear before leaving the house, which struck Aveline as unusual for a man who claimed to be a wandering traveler. 5 marks, the merchant said. 4.5. 5. 4.5, and I'll buy your entire stock of tallow candles at market rate. The merchant considered. Done. Aveline shook his hand, signed the purchase order, and turned to find the stranger standing approximately 6 feet behind her. He had moved from the gate to the courtyard without making a sound, which was either impressive or alarming and was probably both. "You're good at that," he said. "You said that last time, about the horseshoe." "It was true last time. It's true now." "Is there something I can help you with, traveler?" "I'm passing through. Thornwall is on my route." "Your route to where?" "Various places." "That's not an answer." "It's the answer I have." Up close, in daylight, he was even more striking than she remembered. The angles of his face were sharp but not harsh. Strong jaw, straight nose, those impossible cheekbones. His hair was very black, cut short enough to be practical but long enough to look deliberate. And his eyes, pale gray, almost silver, almost the same color as Hayes's fur, which was a coincidence that Aveline noted and filed away. "You found Thornwall then," he said. "The left fork." "The left fork," My Axel survived. Thank you. Your wolf seems to like it here. He nodded toward Hayes, who was lying in a sunny spot near the well. The wolf lifted its head when the man looked at it, and again that strange, unreadable exchange passed between them. Not hostility, not fear, but something that looked almost like recognition. It's not my wolf, Aveline said. It's lying in the sun waiting for you to finish working so it can follow you back inside. It's your wolf. Are you an expert on wolf ownership? I have some experience. His mouth did that thing again, the almost something at the corner. Not a smile, the suggestion of a smile. The architectural plans for a smile that had been approved but not yet constructed. I didn't get your name last time, Aveline said. You didn't ask. I'm asking now. He was quiet for a moment. Evander. Evander. No family name? No pack? Just Evander. That's unusual. I'm an unusual person. Lyra appeared at the courtyard entrance, took one look at Evander, and stopped. Her hand went to her sword, not drawing it, but resting on the hilt in the casual way of a soldier who wanted everyone to know she was armed. Who's this? Lyra asked. A traveler, Aveline said, passing through. Lyra looked at Evander. Evander looked at Lyra. There was a moment of mutual assessment. Two people who were both very good at evaluating threats, sizing each other up with the professional efficiency of predators who had agreed not to fight but wanted to establish the terms. Travelers don't usually stand in my courtyard watching my quartermaster negotiate, Lyra said. Your quartermaster is very good at negotiating, Evander said. It's worth watching. Lyra's eyebrow went up. She looked at Aveline. Aveline looked at the sky. You can stay one night, Lyra said. There's a room in the guest wing. Meals are at the bell. Don't touch anything you're not supposed to touch. I wouldn't dream of it, Evander said, and for the first time his mouth actually curved into something that was undeniably, technically, a smile. It was a very small smile. It lasted approximately 2 seconds. And it was, Aveline thought with great annoyance, extremely effective. He stayed one night. He ate dinner in the mess hall with the soldiers, and he said very little, and he watched everything. And when Petra tried to engage him in a drinking contest, because Petra tried to engage everyone in a drinking contest, he declined politely and said, I don't drink with people who can clearly outdrink me. Petra beamed. I like him, she told Aveline. You like everyone. I like him specifically. He's got good eyes. He's got eyes. I don't know that they're good. They're good. Trust me. That man looks at you like you're the answer to a question he's been asking his whole life. Petra. I'm just saying. Please stop just saying. In the morning, Evander was gone. He had left before dawn, the guest room neatly arranged, the bed made with military precision. The only evidence he had been there at all was a small bundle left on the windowsill of Aveline's cottage. A bunch of dried wildflowers, the kind that grew only in the deep forests of the borderlands, tied with a strip of dark leather. There was no note. Aveline stared at the flowers for a very long time. Then she put them in a cup of water on her desk and went back to work, because she was a practical woman and she did not have time to develop feelings about mysterious strangers who left wildflowers on windowsills. She had provision routes to manage and a garrison to feed and 42 wheels of cheese to distribute before spring. Hayes sniffed the flowers and wagged its tail. Don't start, Aveline told the wolf. Evander came back. He came back a week later, then 5 days after that, then 4 days, then 3. Each time he appeared at the garrison gate like a man who happened to be passing through, and each time he stayed one night, and each time he watched Aveline with those pale silver eyes that saw everything and revealed nothing, and each time he left dried wildflowers on her windowsill. The second time, he helped her repair a broken supply cart. He worked beside her in easy silence, his hands steady and precise. And when she struggled with a stubborn bolt, he did not take the wrench from her. He simply braced the axle so she could get better leverage, and when the bolt finally gave way, he said, "That bolt didn't stand a chance," and she laughed before she could stop herself. The third time, he arrived during a rainstorm. The garrison was battened down, the soldiers huddled in the mess hall, and Evander appeared at the gate, soaking wet with the calm demeanor of a man who had been rained on before and had decided it was not worth having an opinion about. Aveline gave him a blanket. He wrapped it around his shoulders and sat in her cottage while she made tea, and Hayes lay between them and sighed with the deep contentment of a wolf who was exactly where it wanted to be. "You're settling in," Evander said, looking around the cottage. She had made it hers, the desk covered in orderly ledgers, the shelf of medicine jars, the silver combs on the mantel, a wheel of Firewolf cheese aging on a rack in the corner. "I'm working," she corrected. "There's a difference?" "For me, there isn't. Work is the only thing I've ever had that no one could take away from me." She paused. She had not meant to say that. It had come out before she could stop it, the way truth sometimes did when you were warm and dry and sitting near someone whose silence felt safe. Evander looked at her. The firelight caught his face, softening those sharp angles, making his pale eyes look almost warm. "Someone tried to take everything from you," he said. "It was not a question. My husband replaced me with a younger woman and expected me to hand over my title with a smile. I took the cheese and the ledgers instead." "You took the ledgers?" "All of them, written in my personal cipher. Without them, he can't run the keep. He doesn't know how much grain is stored, what the trade contracts say, or when the taxes are due. I imagine it's very inconvenient for him." Evander stared at her, and then he did something Aveline had not seen him do before. He laughed. Not a small laugh, not a polite laugh. A real laugh, low and warm and startled out of him like a bird flushed from cover. It changed his entire face. It made him look younger, more open, almost vulnerable. "You stole his ledgers," he said. "You held his entire keep hostage with bookkeeping. And 42 wheels of cheese." "And 42 wheels of cheese." He was still laughing, quietly now, shaking his head. "You are not what I expected." "What did you expect?" He looked at her. The laughter had faded, but something remained, something warm and careful and very, very focused. "I didn't expect anything," he said. "That's the problem. I walked into that forest 3 weeks ago expecting nothing, and I found you fixing a horseshoe in the middle of nowhere with flour dust still on your sleeve, and I haven't been able to stop coming back." The air between them changed. Aveline felt it, a shift, a tightening, like the atmosphere before a storm. She was suddenly very aware of how close he was sitting, and how the firelight played across his hands, and how his voice had dropped to something quiet and private that felt like it was meant only for this room. "Evander." "I know," he said. "You're not ready. You've just had your world broken, and you're rebuilding, and the last thing you need is another man who thinks he knows what you want." He paused. "But I want you to know that I see you. Not what you were to him, not what you lost. You, the woman who stole her own cheese and ran." She could not speak. There was something lodged in her throat, not tears, not words, but something larger than both. Something that felt like being seen for the first time in 9 years. "I'm going to leave flowers on your windowsill again," he said, "and I'm going to come back, and I'm going to keep coming back, and you don't have to do anything about that. You don't have to feel anything about that, but I wanted you to know." He stood. He left the blanket folded neatly on the chair. He walked to the door. "Evander." He turned. "The flowers," she said. "I like the blue ones." Something moved in his eyes, something fierce and soft and barely controlled. He nodded, once, and then he left. The next time he came, the flowers on her windowsill were all blue. The news from Ashenmore arrived 6 weeks after Aveline's escape, carried by a merchant who had the look of a man who knew his gossip was valuable and intended to extract maximum ale in exchange for it. "Blackmere's a mess," the merchant announced to the Crooked Antler in Brindlewood, where Aveline happened to be purchasing supplies. "The new Luna can't manage the household. Grain stores are wrong, trade contracts are lapsing, the winter taxes are late, and the northern miners are threatening to withhold iron shipments because nobody can find the yield agreements. How terrible, Aveline said, signing a purchase order for 60 pounds of salt. The Alpha's furious. He's been tearing the keep apart looking for the old ledgers. Apparently, they're written in some kind of code nobody can crack. A cipher. It's called a cipher. Whatever it is, the new Luna tried to reconstruct the accounts and got the grain totals so wrong that they accidentally ordered triple the usual wheat shipment and have nowhere to store it. There's wheat stacked in the Great Hall. Aveline allowed herself one small, precise smile. It was the smile of a woman who had spent 9 years being underestimated and was now watching the entirely predictable consequences of that underestimation unfold. Also, the merchant added, lowering his voice, word is Blackmere is looking for her. The old Luna. He's sent scouts south. The smile faded. He wants the ledgers? Aveline asked. He wants the ledgers. He wants the cipher key, and... The merchant hesitated. Some say he wants her back. Not as Luna. That ship sailed, what with the new mate bond and all, but as... I don't know. Steward? Advisor? The word people use is asset. Asset, Aveline repeated. His word, not mine. Asset. 9 years of marriage, and she was an asset. Like a horse. Like a trade contract. Like a very useful piece of furniture that you did not appreciate until someone moved it and you discovered that the floor underneath was scratched. She finished her purchases. She loaded them onto the cart. She drove back to Thornwall with her jaw set and her hands steady and her heart doing something complicated that she refused to examine. Garrick was looking for her. Garrick wanted his ledgers back. Garrick wanted his asset back. She was not going back. The first time Evander touched her, really touched her, not a brush of hands while passing tools, not the accidental contact of fingers around a teacup, was during the raid. It happened at night. Avalon woke to the sound of howling, not wolf howling, but the organized, tactical howling of a pack assault. Someone was attacking Thornwall. She was out of bed and dressed in 45 seconds. She had learned to dress quickly during border emergencies at Ashenmoor. Muscle memory from years of being the person who managed crises while Garrick managed glory. She grabbed her boots, her cloak, and the heavy iron poker from the fireplace. Because she did not have a sword, but she had arms that could lift grain sacks, and a poker was essentially a very angry stick. The courtyard was chaos. Soldiers were scrambling. Lyra was shouting orders with the controlled fury of a commander who had been dragged out of sleep and intended to make someone pay for it. And at the gate, dark shapes were pouring through. Wolves, shifted wolves, at least 20 of them, fast and organized and utterly silent, except for that coordinated howling. "Raiders!" Lyra shouted. "Northern Rogue Pack, form up!" They were not Blackmere wolves. Aveline could tell immediately. These were smaller, rangy, with the desperate look of a pack that had been pushed out of its territory and was attacking border garrisons for supplies. They were not there for conquest. They were there for the storerooms. The storerooms that Aveline had spent 6 weeks rebuilding. "Oh, absolutely not," she said. She ran for the supply building, not to hide, to protect. Those supplies represented 45 trade negotiations, 16 supplier contracts, 11 purchase orders, and one extremely contentious argument about lamp oil. She was not losing them to raiders. She got there ahead of the wolves. She slammed the door shut, braced it with a crossbeam, and positioned herself behind a stack of grain barrels with the iron poker raised, and she waited. 2 raiders hit the door, then 3. The crossbeam held, but the door was old and the wood was groaning. And then Evander was there. He appeared beside her. She did not see him arrive, did not hear him. He was simply suddenly there, as if the shadows had decided to take a specific and extremely competent shape. He had a sword, not a garrison sword, not a standard issue blade, a beautiful, lethal weapon with a silver pommel shaped like a wolf's head, the kind of sword that was made for one person and one person only. "Stay behind me," he said. "I have a poker." "I can see that. Stay behind me anyway." the door broke. Two wolves came through, huge, snarling, teeth bared. Evander moved. He moved like water, like wind, like something that had been born fighting and had never found a reason to stop. The sword flashed silver in the dark, and the first wolf yelped and scrambled backward, a shallow cut across its shoulder. Not lethal, not cruel, just precise enough to say, "I can kill you, but I am choosing not to." The second wolf lunged, and Evander caught it by the scruff and threw it, through a full-grown shifted wolf, back through the door with one arm. One arm. Aveline stood there with her poker and thought, very clearly, "Oh." A third wolf came through a window. It landed on a stack of crates behind Aveline, and she did not think, she just swung. The poker connected with the wolf's shoulder, with a crack that she felt in her bones, and the wolf yelped and tumbled off the crates and scrambled for the broken window, and Aveline stood there breathing hard with the poker raised and iron in her blood. Evander looked at her. In the dark, his pale eyes were almost luminous, and there was something in his expression that she had never seen on a man's face before. Not surprise, not admiration, but something deeper, something that looked like recognition. Like he had been looking for something and had just found it. "You hit a shifted wolf with a fireplace poker," he said. "It was on my grain." "Your grain." "I negotiated that grain shipment for 3 days. I'm not losing it to a wolf with poor impulse control." The fight outside was ending. Lyra's soldiers had pushed the raiders back. Aveline could hear the howling fading into the forest. It was over. She was shaking. She always shook after, not during, never during, but after, when the emergency was handled and the adrenaline had nowhere to go. She gripped the poker and breathed and tried to steady herself. Evander sheathed his sword. He stepped close to her, not touching, not yet, just close. Close enough that she could feel the heat of him. Close enough that his presence was a wall between her and the cold dark outside. "You're shaking," he said. "I always shake after. It's fine. It stops." "Can I?" He hesitated. It was the first time she had heard him hesitate about anything. "Can I touch your hand?" She looked at him. In the dark supply room, surrounded by the grain she had negotiated and the cheese she had made, and the evidence of a life she was building with her own hands, she looked at this man who asked permission. "Yes," she said. He took her hand. His fingers closed around hers, warm, steady, careful. He did not squeeze. He did not pull her closer. He simply held her hand, and his thumb pressed against the inside of her wrist where her pulse was hammering, and he held steady until the shaking stopped. It took 3 minutes. She counted. "Thank you," she whispered. "You hit a wolf with a poker," he said. "You don't need to thank me for holding your hand. I'm thanking you for asking first." Something moved in his face, something raw and almost wounded, and she understood he was not used to being thanked for basic decency, which meant that somewhere in his life, basic decency had been rare, and that understanding made her chest hurt in a way she was not prepared for. He let go of her hand, slowly, like releasing something fragile. "I need to talk to Captain Voss about the garrison's defenses," he said, and his voice was steady again, controlled, the voice of a man who had feelings and kept them on a very short leash. Those raiders knew the layout. They knew where the supply rooms were. Someone told them. "You think there's a spy in the garrison?" "I think your supplies are too valuable for a random attack. Someone is targeting this garrison specifically." He paused. "And I think it might have something to do with the man who's looking for you." Garrick. The name hung in the air between them. "He wouldn't," Aveline said. But she heard the uncertainty in her own voice. "He sent scouts south. He wants his ledgers. And you're living in a garrison that's strategically positioned between his territory and the Silver Reaches." Evander's jaw tightened. "He doesn't need to send his own wolves. He just needs to make this place unsafe enough that you have nowhere to go except back to him." The thought settled into Aveline's stomach like cold iron. "I'm not going back," she said. "No," Evander said, "you're not." He said it with a quietness that was not a suggestion. It was a fact, a decision, a line drawn in the dirt with a silver sword. In the morning, Evander did not leave. He did not explain why. He simply appeared at the mess hall for breakfast, sat down across from Petra, who looked delighted, and ate his porridge with the calm, methodical efficiency of a man who had decided to stay and saw no reason to make a speech about it. Lyra cornered Aveline in the supply room. "Your traveler is still here." "I noticed. He fought off 3 shifted wolves single-handedly last night. One of my soldiers said he threw a full-grown wolf through a door with one arm." "I was there. I saw it." "Who is he?" "He says his name is Evander." "That's not what I asked." Aveline looked at Lyra. "I don't know who he is, but he fights like a king, moves like a shadow, carries a sword with a silver wolf pommel, and every time he shows up, my wolf acts like it's been waiting for him." "Your wolf?" "The wolf that is not mine but lives in my cottage." Lyra was quiet for a moment. Then she said very carefully, "Aveline, the Silver Wolf King. Nobody knows what he looks like. He doesn't attend councils. He doesn't send portraits. He's not the Silver Wolf King. He carries a silver wolf sword. He fights like a one-man army. He appears and disappears from the borderlands at will. And he seems very, very interested in a garrison that sits directly on the border of the Silver Reaches." "He's not the Silver Wolf King," Aveline repeated, but something cold and electric was crawling up her spine because Lyra was very smart and Lyra was very rarely wrong. "Ask him," Lyra said. "And if he is? Then we're either very safe or very compromised, and I'd like to know which before I eat any more of his porridge." Aveline did not ask him. Not yet. She told herself she was waiting for the right moment. She told herself she needed more information. She told herself that a man's identity was his own business, and she was not the kind of woman who demanded answers she was not prepared to receive. The truth was that she was afraid. Not of Evander. She was not afraid of Evander. She was afraid that if she asked the question and got the answer she suspected, everything between them would change. It would stop being a woman and a man and wildflowers on a windowsill. It would become politics, territory, power, the same things that had destroyed her marriage. So she did not ask, and Evander stayed, and the days settled into a rhythm. He worked. That was the thing that surprised her most. He did not sit idle. He helped repair the garrison wall where the raiders had damaged it. He worked with Lyra on defensive strategies, and Lyra, who trusted no one, began to trust him, which was either a testament to his character or his charisma, or both. He trained with the soldiers in the mornings, and they were in awe of him because he fought with a speed and precision that was not natural, that was not normal, that was something other than human. And he was near Aveline, always near, not hovering, not intrusive, but present, a gravitational constant, a fixed point. When she worked in the supply rooms, he was nearby, helping lift crates she could have lifted herself but didn't mind sharing. When she negotiated with merchants, he stood at the edge of the courtyard and watched with those pale silver eyes and that almost smile. When she walked the garrison walls in the evening, looking out at the darkening forest and thinking about all the things she had lost and all the things she was gaining, he appeared beside her and stood in silence. And his silence was the most comforting thing she had ever known. "You're doing it again," she said one evening, standing on the wall walk with the wind pulling at her hair. "Doing what?" "Standing near me and being quiet and making me feel like everything is going to be fine." "Is that a complaint?" "It's an observation." "Would you prefer I stood far away and was loud and made you feel uncertain?" "I would prefer to know why a man who fights like a king and carries a silver wolf sword is spending his days repairing walls and lifting crates in a border garrison." He was quiet. The wind moved between them, carrying the scent of pine and snow and something electric. "Because you're here," he said. She turned to look at him. He was looking at the horizon, and his profile was sharp and beautiful against the darkening sky, and there was no pretense in his voice, no games, no calculation. Just the bare, undecorated truth of a man who had found where he wanted to be and was not interested in being anywhere else. "Evander, I know what you are going to ask," he He turned to face her. The wind caught his black hair, and his eyes were silver in the fading light. "Whatever I tell you does not change this. I first saw you stand in a hall while a man tried to remove your place in front of everyone who depended on you. Then I found you in a forest fixing a horseshoe with 14 crates and no intention of surrendering. I have been unable to walk away from you since. Tell me." "My name is Evander Argentus. I am the Silver Wolf King." The world did not shift. The wall did not crack. The sunset did not change. But Aveline felt the ground beneath her reorganize itself, felt the shape of the last 6 weeks reassemble into a new pattern, one that made more sense and less sense at the same time. The Silver Wolf King, the Ghost King, the man who had united the Western Pacts, who commanded the largest wolf army west of the mountains, who was rumored to be brilliant, ruthless, and completely unknown. He was standing on a wall walk in a border garrison, and he was looking at her like she was the only thing he had ever wanted, and he had been leaving wildflowers on her windowsill. "How long had you known about me? Before Ashenmoor? Before the forest? How long?" she asked. "I heard about you 3 months ago, the Luna of Blackmere who ran the northern keep single-handedly, the woman who disarmed every trap in the territory, the Luna who was smarter than her alpha and never got credit for it. Your name was in every merchant report, every trade negotiation, every territorial briefing that crossed my desk. You came looking for me?" "I came looking for the woman in the reports. I didn't expect." He stopped. For the first time, his composure cracked, and underneath was something unguarded and almost desperate. "I didn't expect you." "What did you expect?" "A political strategist, a useful mind." His voice dropped. "I did not expect the woman in those reports to make every title I carried feel less important than whether she trusted me." The air between them was charged. Aveline could feel her heartbeat in her throat, in her wrists, in the tips of her fingers. She could feel the heat of him, even though they were not touching, even though there were 6 inches of cold air between them that felt like nothing at all. "The wolf," she said. "Hayes, that's one of yours." "That's my scout, my best scout. I sent it ahead to watch the borderlands. It found you instead." "It got caught in a trap." "I know. It told me." "It told you?" "Pack bond. Not words, impressions, images. It sent me the image of a woman with flour on her sleeve and steady hands who opened an iron trap and told a wolf not to bite her because she had cheese to steal." Aveline stared at him. "That's when I came to find you," he said. "Not for the reports, not for the politics. Because my wolf sent me a picture of a woman who talked to wild animals like they were mildly inconvenient fellow stewards, and I needed to know who she was." Something broke open inside her. Not pain, something warmer, something that had been locked away so long she had forgotten what it felt like. It felt like being chosen, not because she was useful, not because she was convenient, because she was herself, flour-dusted, poker-wielding, cheese-stealing, ledger-ciphering herself, and that was enough. "Say something," Evander said, and there was a raw edge to his voice that she had never heard before. The Silver Wolf King, the Ghost King, the man who commanded armies, was standing in front of her asking her to say something, and he looked terrified. She reached up. She put her hand on his jaw. His skin was warm under her fingers, and she felt him go perfectly, absolutely still. Not frozen, but held, like a breath waiting to be released. "The blue wildflowers," she said. "Where do they grow?" He blinked. Whatever he had expected her to say, that was not it. "In the silver reaches, in the highland meadows, they grow wild above the tree line." "You rode to the silver reaches to pick me flowers." "I ride 2 days each way, yes." "Every time?" "Every time." She stood on her toes. She was tall, but he was taller, so much taller. And she had to stretch, and her hand slid from his jaw to the back of his neck, and she felt his pulse hammering under her fingertips. She kissed him. It was not a gentle kiss. It was not careful. It was the kiss of a woman who had spent 9 years being gentle and careful and getting nothing for it, and she was done being gentle. She kissed him like she meant it, and he made a sound, a low, broken sound, and his hands came up to her waist, and he pulled her against him, and his arms were strong, and his mouth was warm, and the wind whipped around them on the wall walk, and she did not feel cold at all. When she pulled back, his eyes were dark. Not pale silver anymore, dark like storm clouds, like something had been unleashed behind them that he could barely control. "Aveline," he said, and her name in his mouth sounded like a prayer and a curse at the same time. "I just kissed the Silver Wolf King on a wall walk in front of possibly the entire garrison," she said. "So I suppose the secret care. Lyra is going to say she told me so. I don't care. Petra is going to make this into a ballad. I really don't care." He kissed her again. This time it was slower, deliberate, thorough. The kiss of a man who had been thinking about this for weeks and intended to be comprehensive. His hand came up to cup the side of her face, and his thumb traced her cheekbone, and he kissed her like she was something precious that he was afraid of breaking and determined to hold. Below the wall, Petra's voice carried up with perfect clarity. "I knew it." They broke apart. Aveline buried her face in Evander's shoulder and laughed, really laughed, the first real laugh she had felt in months, and Evander's arms tightened around her, and his chin rested on top of her head, and she could feel his chest vibrating with a laugh he was trying very hard to suppress. "Your soldiers are watching," he said. "They're not my soldiers." "They are now." The days that followed were strange and golden and terrifying. Strange, because Aveline was suddenly in the middle of a border balance she had not anticipated. Evander, the Silver Wolf King, she was still getting used to that, had not come to the borderlands alone. He had, as it turned out, a network of scouts, informants, and strategically placed wolves throughout the unclaimed territory, and Thornwall Garrison was sitting at the center of it, like a pawn on a chessboard that had just been promoted to queen. Golden, because Evander was, there was no other word for it, magnificent. Not just physically, though that was undeniable. He was brilliant. He was strategic. He was the kind of leader who listened more than he spoke, and who treated every person in the garrison with the same careful respect, from Lyra to the youngest recruit. And when he looked at Aveline, which was often, his face did something that she suspected he was not aware of, something soft and stunned and so openly adoring that it made Petra weep into her breakfast. "It's not fair," Petra said, wiping her eyes. "He looks at her like that, and I'm supposed to just eat my oatmeal." "Eat your oatmeal, Petra," Nessa said dryly. Terrifying, because word was spreading. Merchants talked, soldiers talked. The story of the Blackmere Luna who had fled with the household ledgers and ended up in the arms of the Silver Wolf King was the kind of story that people could not resist telling, and they told it from the Crooked Antler to the northern border and back again, gaining embellishments with each retelling. By the time the story reached Ashenmore Keep, Aveline had apparently stolen not 42 but 400 wheels of cheese, seduced the Silver Wolf King with witchcraft, and was plotting to invade the northern territories with an army of enchanted wolves. The real story was more mundane and more wonderful. She was a quartermaster who was falling in love with a king who kept leaving flowers on her windowsill. The jealousy came next. Not from Evander, or rather from Evander, but not in any way that was hostile. It surfaced in small, precise, almost invisible ways that Aveline might not have noticed if she had not been paying very close attention. There was a merchant named Aldrich, tall, dark-haired 20-something, with the kind of easy charm that came from a lifetime of knowing he was good-looking and had excellent teeth. He came to Thornwall every 2 weeks to deliver dried goods, and he had, since Aveline's arrival, been flirting with her in the cheerful, harmless way of a young man who did not expect to get anywhere but enjoyed the journey. "Lady Ashwood," Aldrich said, sweeping into the supply room with his usual theatrical bow. "The most beautiful quartermaster in the Northern Territories. I've brought your salt, your tallow, and a poem I wrote about your eyes." "I don't need a poem about my eyes, Aldrich. I need 30 pounds of beeswax." "I can get you beeswax. I can get you anything. I once sourced a live peacock for a duke's wedding. A peacock, Lady Ashwood. Have you ever tried to transport a live peacock? They scream. They scream like someone is murdering them, which is unfair because I was providing excellent accommodations. The beeswax, Aldrich. Right. Yes, beeswax. I'll have it next shipment. In the meantime, he reached into his coat and produced a single red flower, slightly crushed from the journey. A humble token of my undying. Merchant. Aldrich turned. Evander was standing in the doorway of the supply room. He was leaning against the doorframe with his arms crossed, and his expression was perfectly, dangerously neutral. "Oh," Aldrich said. "Hello, are you the—" "I'm the man who is standing in this doorway," Evander said. "Watching you give my—" He stopped, corrected himself with visible effort. "Watching you give the quartermaster a crushed flower. It's not crushed, it's artfully wilted. It's dead. It's romantically distressed." Evander looked at the flower. He looked at Aldrich. He looked at Aveline. His expression did not change. It remained that perfect porcelain neutrality, but his left eye twitched exactly once, and Aveline, who had become an expert in the micro-expressions of the Silver Wolf King, recognized that twitch as the equivalent of a volcano politely clearing its throat. "Aldrich," Aveline said, taking the flower and setting it on the counter. "Thank you for the salt. I'll see you in 2 weeks for the beeswax." "Of course, my lady. Always a pleasure. Always an honor. I'll go now. The tall man is looking at me like I'm a mathematical problem he's solving, and I don't think I'm going to like the answer." Aldrich left, quickly. Aveline looked at Evander. "He's harmless." "He brought you a dead flower." It was a gesture. "It was a dead flower. I ride 2 days through mountain passes to bring you live flowers from Highland meadows, and that boy gives you a dead weed from his pocket. Are you jealous?" "I am not jealous. I am making an objective qualitative comparison between floral offerings." "You're jealous." "I am the Silver Wolf King. I do not experience jealousy. I experience border sense." Aveline smiled. She walked up to him, slowly, deliberately, watching his composure fracture with each step. She stopped close enough that she had to tilt her head up to look at him, and she put her hand flat against his chest. "Your heart is beating very fast for someone who isn't jealous," she said. His jaw tightened. His hand came up and covered hers, pressing it harder against his chest, and she could feel the hammering of his heart, the raw, undeniable evidence of a man who was not as controlled as he pretended to be. "The flowers from the meadow," he said, his voice low. "Do you prefer them?" "You know I do." "Then I need you to know that I will continue to bring them. Every time, no matter how far the ride." His thumb traced across her knuckles. "And if that merchant brings you one more flower, dead or alive, I am going to buy his entire stock of beeswax and candles and anything else he sells and have it delivered to you in a cart with my seal on it, so he understands exactly whose quartermaster he is flirting with." "That seems excessive." "I'm a king. Excessive is my baseline." She kissed him. Just a brief, firm kiss against his jaw, and she felt him shudder, a full-body shudder, barely controlled, and his hand tightened on hers. "Go be territorial somewhere else," she said. "I have inventory to finish." "I am not territorial." "You are literally growling." He was, in fact, growling, a low, barely audible rumble in his chest that he clearly had not realized he was producing. He stopped, blinked, looked down at his own chest with an expression of mild betrayal, as if his body had done something without consulting him. "I'll be outside," he said. "You'll be outside." "Strategically." "Of course, strategically." He left. Aveline watched him go and felt her heart doing something complicated and warm and absolutely ungovernable, and she pressed her hand against her own chest and breathed. Petra appeared from behind a stack of crates where she had clearly been hiding. He was growling. "Petra." "He was growling because a pretty merchant boy gave you a flower. That man is gone for you. Absolutely, catastrophically gone." Please stop hiding behind my supply crates." "Never. This is better than the Wandering Wolves theater troupe, and they once did a production of The Ballad of the Lost Moon King that made an entire audience weep." Evander had ridden west before dawn after receiving a sealed report from his commanders. He had left no promise except that he would return. Aveline told herself she did not need one. The empty place beside the supply table disagreed. The confrontation came on a cold morning in late autumn. Aveline was in the garrison courtyard, supervising the delivery of winter supplies, the culmination of 2 months of careful planning, negotiation, and the kind of meticulous organizational work that nobody ever celebrated, but everyone relied on. Barrels of salt, crates of dried meat, bolts of heavy cloth, jars of preserved fruit, bundles of medicinal herbs, enough to sustain the garrison through the darkest months. She heard the hooves before she saw the riders. They came from the North Road, a column of mounted warriors, maybe 30 strong, carrying the dark banner of Blackmere Pack. At their head, on his black warhorse, rode Garrick. He looked different, harder. The easy confidence that she had known was still there, but it was strained, like a wire pulled too tight. His silver-gray eyes swept the garrison with the particular intensity of a man who was accustomed to being the most powerful person in any room and was reassessing that assumption. Beside him, on a fine chestnut horse, rode a man Aveline did not recognize. Broad, dark-bearded, with the bearing of a noble and the expression of someone who was enjoying himself more than the situation warranted. His armor bore the crest of Goldenmere. Lord Voss, Lenora's father. Behind them, on the white mare with the braided ribbons, rode Lenora. She did not look like the blushing bride who had ridden into Ashenmoor Keep 2.5 months ago. She looked tired. Her golden hair was braided tightly, and her white furs were travel-stained, and her expression was the expression of a young woman who had recently discovered that being Luna was significantly harder than being a lord's daughter and was not handling the transition well. The garrison alarm sounded. Lyra was on the wall in seconds, bow in hand. Her soldiers assembled with the disciplined speed of people who had been trained by a captain who did not tolerate delays. "Blackmere," Lyra shouted from the wall. "State your business." Garrick looked up. "I'm here for my wife." Lyra looked at Aveline. Aveline's jaw was set, her hands were steady, and she was holding a clipboard, because she had been in the middle of checking a delivery manifest, and she was not the kind of woman who dropped a clipboard for dramatic effect. "Your wife is standing right next to you on a white horse," Aveline called up from the courtyard. Her voice carried clean across the stone walls. "Perhaps you should look to your left." The courtyard went silent. One of Lyra's soldiers choked on a laugh. Garrick's jaw tightened. "Aveline, open the gate." "This isn't my gate to open. You're addressing Captain Voss's garrison, not my kitchen. Though I notice you never asked me to open anything when it was my kitchen. You just walked in and expected dinner." Lyra looked down at Garrick. She looked at the 30 mounted warriors. She looked at Aveline, who gave her a very small nod. "Open the gate," Lyra said. "But any wolf who shifts inside my walls without permission gets a crossbow bolt and an invoice for wall repairs." The gate opened. Garrick rode in. He dismounted with the same easy grace she remembered, the fluid movement of a man whose body had never failed him and who therefore assumed nothing ever would. He handed his reins to a soldier and walked across the courtyard toward Aveline, and she watched him come, and she felt, what? Not fear, not love. Something complicated and heavy and ancient, like finding a book you used to love and discovering that the pages had gone yellow and the words no longer moved you. He was still beautiful. That was the cruelest part. Time and betrayal had not diminished him. His silver-gray eyes still caught the light. His jaw was still sharp enough to cut paper. He was still the man she had married at 22, flushed and shaking and so certain that love was enough. "Aveline," he said, and his voice was softer now. The command was gone. What remained was something rawer, something that might have been regret if Garrick Blackmere had been the kind of man who admitted to regret. "Garrick, you look well." "I am well. I have a job, a cottage with a roof that doesn't leak, and 42 wheels of cheese. I've never been better. I need the ledgers. I know you need the ledgers. I hear you accidentally ordered triple the wheat, and it's stacked in the Great Hall. Who told you that? Merchants, they talk. Especially when your new Luna tried to renegotiate the grain contract and offered twice the market rate because she didn't know what the market rate was, because I'm the one who tracked the market rate for 9 years, because I'm the one who did everything, Garrick. He flinched. It was small, a tightening around his eyes, a shift in his shoulders, but she saw it because she had spent 9 years learning to read this man, and she could read him even now, even after everything. I know, he said. I know you did everything. I didn't see it. I should have. Yes, you should have. Come back. The words landed like stones in still water. Not as Luna, he added quickly. I know. The bond with Lenora, but as advisor. Steward. You could run the household, the accounts, the trade. You want me to come back and do all the work I used to do, without the title, without the position, without the marriage, while your new wife sits in my chair and wears my role and sleeps in my bed. Our bed. It was never our bed, Garrick. It was my bed. I'm the one who lay in it alone every night you were gone, which was most nights, and I'm the one who bled in it when I lost our child alone, because you were at a council meeting and nobody wanted to interrupt you. The courtyard went very, very still. Garrick's face changed. Something cracked behind his eyes, not the controlled discomfort of a political problem, but something deeper, older, the kind of crack that happened when a man was forced to see something he had spent years looking away from. I didn't know, he said. I didn't know you were alone when... You didn't ask. You came back from the council meeting and I told you what happened and you held me for 5 minutes and then you left to handle a border report. 5 minutes, Garrick. That's what our child was worth. 5 minutes. Lord Voss, still mounted, shifted uncomfortably. Even he, a man who had traded his daughter for a political alliance, looked like he would rather be somewhere else. Lenora was staring at Aveline. The young Luna's expression was not hostile. It was not triumphant. It was the expression of a girl who was hearing the actual cost of the thing she had been given and was realizing, perhaps for the first time, that she had bought something with someone else's blood. Aveline, Garrick said, and he took a step forward, and his hand came up as if to reach for her, and... The first silver horn sounded beyond Thornwall's southern ridge. A second answered it. Then the ground began to tremble beneath disciplined hooves. Every face in the courtyard turned as silver banners rose beyond the wall. The southern portcullis lifted on Captain Lyra Dane's signal, and Evander rode through in closed black-silver armor at the head of 80 mounted soldiers. 2 allied alphas flanked him. Behind them came rank after rank of soldiers in winter cloaks, their weapons sheathed, but their formation precise enough to make Garrick's 30 warriors look like an ill-considered hunting party. Evander had left Thornwall before dawn without explanation. Now Aveline understood why. He had not gone to fetch permission. He had gone to fetch witnesses, strength, and enough visible power that nobody could quietly carry her away and rewrite the story afterward. He dismounted before the final hoofbeat faded. He crossed the courtyard and stopped beside Aveline, not in front of her. His hand remained at his side, open, waiting for her choice. Garrick reached toward her again. Touch her and lose the hand, Evander said. His voice was quiet. 80 soldiers heard him anyway. Garrick froze. His gaze moved from the silver banners to the allied alphas, then to the man standing beside the wife he had discarded. Who are you? Evander Argentus, Silver Wolf King. Evander's pale eyes did not leave him. I brought an army because you brought one first. I brought neutral alphas because you neglected the law. Aveline will speak for herself. You will listen. What is the Silver Wolf King to you? Garrick asked. That's none of your business, Garrick. You're still legally my wife. The dissolution. The dissolution that you haven't filed? The one that requires my signature, which you haven't requested? The one that should have been processed by the Pack Elder Council 2 months ago, but wasn't. Because you were too busy trying to manage a keep without my ledgers to bother with the paperwork? Garrick's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Yes, Aveline said. I know it hasn't been filed, because I know how pack law works, because I rewrote half of it. You cannot claim a new Luna without dissolving the existing bond, and you cannot dissolve the existing bond without the consent of the existing Luna, which means Lenora's Luna mark is ceremonially incomplete, which means your new mate bond is legally void, which means she let a small, precise smile cross her face. You've been living in sin, Garrick. How embarrassing. Lord Voss made a strangled noise. Lenora went pale. Garrick looked like a man who had just realized that the woman he had underestimated for 9 years had been playing a longer game than he ever imagined. You did this on purpose, he said. You left without signing the dissolution because you knew. I left because you replaced me with a child and expected me to smile about it. The legal implications were a bonus. She paused, a very satisfying bonus. Behind her, she heard Evander exhale, a short, sharp breath that might have been a laugh compressed into its smallest possible form. Here's what's going to happen, Aveline said. You're going to file the dissolution properly. You're going to have it witnessed by 3 neutral alphas, as required by the pack law that I wrote. You're going to restore my full dowry, every coin, every piece of silver, every bolt of fabric. And you're going to write a formal letter of good standing, confirming that I left Blackmere Pack of my own volition, with my honor intact, and that any rumor to the contrary is a lie. And the ledgers? Once I have the signed dissolution, the restored dowry, and the letter of good standing, I will send you the cipher key. Not the ledgers. Those are mine. The key. You can reconstruct the records yourself. Consider it a learning experience. Aveline, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. Reasonable is the only thing I've ever been. For 9 years, I was so reasonable that you forgot I was a person. Well, I'm done being reasonable for your benefit, Garrick. I'm being reasonable for mine. Garrick stood there. The wind moved through the courtyard, lifting his dark hair. And for a moment, just a moment, she saw something in his face that she recognized. Not the alpha, not the politician, the man. The man she had loved, the man who had held her on cold nights and laughed at her jokes, and once carried her across a flooded stream because her boots were new and he did not want them ruined. He had loved her. She believed that. Not well, not enough. But he had loved her, and the loss of that love was a real thing, and she honored it even as she refused to go back to it. I'm sorry, he said, and it was real. She could hear it. The rough edge of a genuine apology dragged out of a man who had never practiced saying those words. I know, she said, but sorry doesn't rebuild what you broke. The dissolution, Garrick. Send it. Aveline opened the leather folder clipped beneath her delivery manifest. 3 copies of the dissolution waited inside, already marked with the clauses Garrick had ignored. She had prepared them the night the merchant called her an asset. She had stopped allowing powerful men to make her improvise her own freedom. Evander and the 2 allied alphas stepped forward as neutral witnesses. Garrick looked at the documents, at the 80 silent riders, and finally at Aveline. For the first time in 9 years, he understood that delay was no longer a form of control available to him. He lowered himself beside a supply crate and signed. The posture was not theatrical. It was worse for him than theater. The Alpha of Blackmere knelt in the mud while the woman he had tried to reduce to a steward took back her name, her dowry, and the legal right to leave him. Lenora removed the incomplete Luna seal from her throat. Her fingers shook as she placed it on the crate. Aveline did not take it. It belongs in the Blackmere archive until your bond is made lawful, she said. A title is not a ribbon another woman can tie around your neck. Garrick signed the final page. One of the allied alphas sealed it. Captain Lyra Dane sealed the garrison record. Evander said nothing, because the victory was Aveline's and he knew better than to put his name over hers. He nodded, slowly, like a man setting down something heavy. Then he looked at Evander, and something shifted in his expression, not hostility, but recognition. A wolf recognizing another wolf, a king recognizing another king. Take care of her, Garrick said. That is not yours to ask, Evander replied. And she doesn't need taking care of. She needs someone who sees what she builds and never makes her build it alone. Garrick flinched again, harder this time. He turned. He mounted his horse. Lord Voss, who had been silent through the entire exchange with the expression of a man who was rapidly recalculating the value of his political investment, followed suit. Lenora hesitated. She looked at Aveline from her white mare, and her face was open and conflicted and very young. Lady Ashwood, she said, I didn't know. About what you went through, he told me you were happy to leave. He said what was convenient. That's what Garrick does. I'm sorry. Aveline looked at the young woman, 23, golden-haired, exhausted, and painfully out of her depth, and felt something shift inside her. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the absence of hatred, which was its own form of freedom. Learn the accounts, Aveline said. Don't let him hire someone else to do it. If you're going to be Luna, be Luna. Know where the money goes. Know what the grain costs. Know the names of the miners and the merchants and the kitchen staff. And if he ever makes you feel like a decoration instead of a partner, take the cheese and leave. Lenora stared at her. Then, impossibly, she smiled. A real smile, small and startled and genuine. The cheese, she said. Always the cheese. They left. 30 warriors, 2 lords, and a young woman on a white horse rode back north through the garrison gate and into the cold morning. Aveline stood in the courtyard and watched them go. The clipboard was still in her hand. Her delivery manifest was still unfinished. The winter supplies were still waiting to be checked and catalogued and stored. Evander stood beside her, not touching, not speaking, just there. I'm going to finish my inventory now, she said. I know. And then I'm going to have a very large glass of wine. I'll join you. And then I'm going to cry, just once, just for 5 minutes. And then I'm going to stop, and I'm going to be fine. His hand found hers. His fingers laced through hers, warm and steady and certain. Take as long as you need, he said. She did not take long. She took exactly 5 minutes, sitting in her cottage with Hayes's silver head on her knee and Evander's hand in hers, and she cried for the woman she had been at 22 who had believed that love was enough, and then she stopped. Then she finished her inventory. The weeks that followed were a complicated negotiation between duty, desire, and the lingering wreckage of a broken marriage. The dissolution papers arrived 3 weeks after Garrick's visit, delivered by a neutral courier under the seal of the Pack Elder Council. 3 neutral alphas had witnessed. Aveline's full dowry had been restored, every coin, every piece of silver, and a formal letter of good standing bore Garrick's signature in the sharp, angular handwriting she knew so well. She signed the dissolution. She sent the cipher key north with the courier, and then she took the Luna seal, the dark iron medallion she had worn for 9 years, and she set it on her desk and she looked at it for a long time. What will you do with it? Nessa asked. The healer had come by with a jar of willow bark tea, which was Nessa's solution to everything from headaches to heartbreak. I don't know. It's not mine anymore. It was never really mine. It belongs to the Blackmere Luna, whoever she is. You could send it back. I could. Aveline picked up the seal. It was heavy in her hand. Or I could melt it down and make something new. Like what? I don't know yet, but I'm tired of wearing things that belong to other people's stories. She did not melt it down. Not yet. She put it in a drawer and closed it, and the sound of the drawer closing was the sound of a chapter ending. Evander, meanwhile, was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. Not because he was demanding, he was the opposite of demanding. He was patient and careful and unfailingly respectful of her space and her grief and her process. But he was also present, and his presence was a physical force, like gravity, like the tide, like something natural and inevitable that you could not resist without exhausting yourself. He trained with the garrison soldiers every morning, and Aveline watched from the supply room window, and she told herself she was checking inventory. And she was checking inventory, but she was also watching the way he moved, fluid and powerful and precise, and the way the sunlight caught the angles of his face, and the way he laughed with Petra after she accidentally knocked him off balance with a shield bash that she was very proud of. "Did you see that?" Petra crowed. "I knocked the Silver Wolf King on his royal backside." "You caught me off guard," Evander said, picking himself up with dignity. "I knocked you on your backside. It was a very good shield bash. I'm going to tell everyone. I'm going to tell my mother. I'm going to tell the merchant boy. I'm going to commission a ballad." "Please don't commission a ballad." "Too late. The ballad is already being composed in my heart." Aveline laughed. She pressed her hand over her mouth to muffle it, but Evander's head turned, immediately, unerringly, as if her laughter were a sound he was specifically attuned to, and he looked up at the window and found her watching him, and his face did the thing. The soft thing. The stunned thing. The thing that made Petra's eyes water and Nessa's mouth twitch, and every soldier in the garrison develop a sudden, urgent need to be somewhere else so they could have a private opinion about it. "He's looking at you again," Nessa said, appearing beside Aveline at the window with a cup of tea and the calm of a woman who found young love mildly entertaining. "I know. Like you hung the moon and also invented bread." "I did invent a bread recipe. That probably makes it worse." The second kiss happened in the rain. A storm came in from the west, a proper storm, the kind that turned the sky black and the ground to rivers, and made the garrison walls shake. Aveline was running across the courtyard trying to secure the supply room shutters before the rain destroyed a shipment of dried herbs that she had spent 3 weeks sourcing. And Evander was there because Evander was always there, and they were both soaking wet and shouting over the wind and fighting with a shutter that had come loose from its hinge. "Hold it, hold the left side." "I'm holding it." "The left side, Evander, your other left." "I know which side is left." The shutter gave way. It swung open and cracked Evander across the shoulder, and he grunted. And Aveline grabbed the shutter and slammed it shut with both hands and held it while he jammed the locking pin into place. And then they were standing in the rain, gasping, soaked to the skin, and the shutter was secure, and the herbs were saved, and Evander was looking at her. His hair was plastered to his forehead. Water ran down his face, his jaw, his neck. His pale eyes were luminous in the storm dark, and he was breathing hard, and his shirt was soaked through and clinging to shoulders that were broad and defined and extremely distracting. "Your herbs are safe," he said. "My herbs are safe." "You're welcome." "You got hit by a shutter." "It was a tactical sacrifice." She laughed. She was soaking wet and cold and standing in a thunderstorm, and she laughed, and his eyes went dark, and he took one step forward, and his hands came up and framed her face. Wet hands, warm hands, steady hands, and he kissed her. The rain came down, the thunder rolled, his mouth was warm against the cold rain on her lips, and her hands fisted in the front of his soaked shirt, and she pulled him closer, and the rain ran between their mouths, and it tasted like lightning and pine, and the specific electric sweetness of wanting someone who wanted you back with equal ferocity. When they broke apart, he pressed his forehead against hers. Water streamed down both their faces. His thumbs traced her cheekbones, wiping away rain that was immediately replaced by more rain. "I am going to build you a supply room with better shutters," he said. "That's the most romantic thing anyone has ever said to me. I'll build you a whole fortress if you want, with a cheese cellar, and a library, and shutters that don't come off in a light breeze." That wasn't a light breeze, that was a gale. "For you, I would fight a gale." "You just did fight a gale." "Then consider it a down payment." She kissed him again. Briefly, firmly, a punctuation mark on a sentence she was still learning to write. Then she pulled away and wrung the water out of her hair. "We should go inside before we both catch a cold," she said. "Nessa will make us drink willow bark tea, and it tastes like misery in a cup." "I've had worse." "You haven't had Nessa's willow bark tea." They went inside. Separately, because Aveline was a woman who understood that some things needed to move at a pace. and because the garrison soldiers were already composing commentary that she did not need to encourage. But she could feel him behind her, the warmth of him, the weight of his presence, the gravitational pull of a man who had declared himself and was waiting, with infinite patience, for her to be ready. She was almost ready. The crisis came in winter. The next challenge arrived not with an army, but with a council summons, carried by a rider who was half frozen and fully terrified. The seal belonged to the Northern Alpha Council, whose elders intended to force the Silver Reaches back into dependence through winter tolls and closed mountain roads. Evander read it in Aveline's cottage. Hayes was lying in front of the fire. Aveline was sitting at her desk, and she watched his face as he read, and she watched it go hard. What is it? The Northern Alpha Council has declared the Silver Reaches a threat to territorial stability. They're demanding that I surrender my western borders and submit to council oversight. They can't do that. They can if they have enough alphas to vote for it, and Garrick Blackmere is leading the coalition. Aveline went cold. Garrick? He's been consolidating Northern support for months. This isn't about the Silver Reaches, it's about leverage. He signed the dissolution. He gave you the letter of good standing. But he's been building a political weapon since the day he left this garrison. If he can force me into submission, he can claim this territory, including Thornwall, including you. He wouldn't. He would, not because he wants you back as a wife, because he can't stand that someone else has what he threw away. I've seen it before. Men who don't want the thing they lost, they just want to make sure nobody else has it either. Aveline stood. She walked to the window and looked out at the garrison courtyard, where snow was falling softly, blanketing the stone walls in white. She had built something here. A life, a purpose, a place where she was valued for what she did, not for who she belonged to. How many alphas does Garrick have? She asked. 7. He needs 9 for a council majority. The 9th and 10th votes are undecided. Alpha Auric of Ironwood and Alpha Maeve of Red Hollow. Maeve, Aveline said. I know Maeve. She traded with Ashenmore for years. I negotiated her iron contracts personally. Evander looked at her. You know Maeve? I know her grain needs, her iron yields, her shipping seasons, and the name of the Forge Widow, whose cooperative she protected when 3 lords tried to seize it. Maeve does not care about territorial theater. She cares whether ordinary people survive the winter. If Garrick threatens that, she will vote against him. And Auric? Auric is a pragmatist. He doesn't want war. He wants predictability. If you can offer him a trade alliance that's more profitable than Garrick's coalition, he'll swing your way. Evander was staring at her. Not with surprise. He had stopped being surprised by her weeks ago. But with the particular intensity of a man who was watching the woman he loved become the most strategically important person in the room. You can do this, he said. You can turn the council. I can do the numbers. I can draft the trade proposals. I can reach Maeve through the merchant channels, and I can build a case for Auric based on harvest and tribute forecasts. But I need access to your trade records, your territorial assessments, and your military disposition reports. You want access to the Silver Reaches classified intelligence. I want access to the things I need to save your kingdom from my ex-husband's bruised ego. His mouth twitched. The classified intelligence is in the Silver Reaches, in my capital, in my council chambers. Then I suppose I need to go to the Silver Reaches. He stood. He crossed the room to where she stood at the window, and he was close, so close that she could feel his breath on her temple, and his hand came up and touched her hair, just barely, just the lightest brush of his fingers against the dark auburn strands that had come loose from her braid. Come with me, he said. Not as a guest, not as an advisor. Come as my equal. Stand beside me in my council chamber and show them what I already know, that you are the most brilliant strategist in the Northern Territories, and Garrick Blackmere was a fool to let you go. You're asking me to enter the Silver Wolf King's court. I'm asking you to enter my home. The word hit differently than she expected. Home. She had not had one in months. She had had quarters, and a cottage, and a desk, and a fireplace. But a home. A place where you were wanted, where your presence was the point rather than the inconvenience. Yes, she said. The journey to the Silver Reaches took 4 days. Evander traveled with a company of his wolves, real wolves, and shifted wolves both, a fluid, silver-furred escort that materialized from the borderlands, as if the forest itself had been waiting for his call. Hayes took its place at the front of the pack with the smug satisfaction of a wolf that had been undercover for months and was pleased to resume its official duties. Your scout wolf has been eating my chamomile and sleeping on my floor for 3 months, Aveline told Evander as they rode. It was gathering intelligence. It was rolling in valerian root and begging for cheese. Those activities are not mutually exclusive. Lyra stayed at Thornwall with the garrison. Petra came with them, partly as Aveline's personal guard, partly because Petra had declared that she was not missing the most exciting political event of the decade and had packed her kit with the enthusiasm of a woman who believed that all problems could be solved with sufficient arm strength and a good attitude. Nessa also came, because Aveline had asked her to, and because Nessa had said, in her quiet, precise way, "You'll need someone who sees clearly when everyone else is seeing what they want to see." The Silver Reaches were breathtaking. The landscape changed as they crossed the border. The dark pines of the borderlands gave way to silver birch forests, crystal-clear rivers, and mountain valleys that looked like they had been painted by someone who had very strong feelings about the color blue. The air was thinner, sharper, cleaner. Everything glittered. "It's beautiful," Aveline said. "It was falling apart 2 years ago," Evander said. The Western packs were fractured. No central stewardship, no trade infrastructure, no territorial coordination. The Silver Reaches had the resources to be the wealthiest territory in the north, and they were squandering them on internal feuds. "And you fixed it?" "I'm fixing it. It's ongoing. The military is stabilized, the borders are secure, but the economy is still fragile. We have silver mines, timber, and agricultural potential, but our trade relationships with the northern packs are weak because the previous regime never invested in them." He paused. "That's why the Council's declaration is so dangerous. If Garrick's coalition imposes trade sanctions, the Silver Reaches economy will contract. My people will suffer. Then we make sure that doesn't happen." The capital was called Argenthold. It was a fortress city built into the side of a mountain. Its walls carved from silver-veined granite that caught the light and threw it back in prismatic patterns. It was beautiful and formidable, and exactly the kind of place that would be designed by a man who valued both aesthetics and defensibility. The court of the Silver Wolf King was not what Aveline had expected. She had spent 9 years in Ashenmore Keep, which was dark and cold and decorated with the skulls of enemies because Garrick thought it looked intimidating. Argenthold was light. The main hall had floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the mountain valley. The walls were lined not with trophies but with maps, detailed, annotated maps of trade routes, territorial boundaries, and resource deposits. "You decorated your throne room with maps," Aveline said. "Maps are more useful than skulls." Garrick has skulls. Garrick has skulls and no idea how much grain he has in storage. I rest my case. His council was small, 6 advisors, each one responsible for a different aspect of stewardship. They were waiting in the council chamber when Evander entered, and they rose, and their eyes went from him to Aveline with the undisguised curiosity of people who had been hearing rumors for weeks and were now confronted with the reality. "This is Aveline Ashwood," Evander said, "former Luna of Blackmere Pack, current quartermaster of Thornwall Garrison, future strategic advisor to the Silver Wolf Court." Aveline looked at him. "We haven't discussed the title." "I'm discussing it now. Do you object?" "I object to the word future. I'm advising now, right now, starting this minute." His counsel stared. "She's terrifying," whispered Aldrich's cousin Jocelyn, a young nobleman who served as Evander's trade envoy and bore a striking resemblance to his merchant cousin, including the excellent teeth and the tendency to say exactly what he was thinking at the worst possible moment. "She can hear you," Aveline said. I know, Jocelyn said. I wanted you to hear me. It was a compliment. Aveline liked Jocelyn immediately. He was 26, blonde, handsome in an entirely unthreatening way, and possessed of a genuine warmth that made him impossible to dislike. He was also, she discovered quickly, an excellent trade envoy, sharp, personable, and gifted with the ability to make people agree to things before they realized they were agreeing. He's good, she told Evander after the first council meeting. He's the best envoy I have. He also flirts with everyone. He flirts with furniture. I've seen him compliment a chair. It's a gift. Does he flirt with you? He once told me my crown brought out the brooding intensity of my eyes. I nearly fired him. But you didn't. He was right about the crown. She threw a map scroll at him. He caught it without looking, because of course he did, and his mouth curved into that small, devastating smile that she was becoming addicted to. The work began. Aveline prepared for the council with the same intensity she had brought to Ashenmoor's ledgers and Thornwall's provision routes. She studied which territories depended on which winter roads, then drafted a plain offer for Alpha Auric of Ironwood and a personal letter to Alpha Maeve of Red Hollow. The letter mentioned the forge cooperative Maeve had defended years earlier and the southern bridge whose collapse had nearly isolated 3 villages. You are including the forge widows? Evander asked, reading over her shoulder. Maeve risked 3 alliances to keep their workshop open. Anyone can memorize what a ruler buys. Trust begins when you remember what she was willing to protect. He was quiet for a moment, then he said, My mother liked cornflowers, blue ones. She grew them on the windowsill of our cottage before she died. Aveline looked up at him. His face was still, that controlled, composed stillness he wore like armor, but his eyes were open, and in them she saw the boy he had been before he was a king. The wildflowers, she said softly, the blue ones you bring me. They're cornflowers, the same kind she grew. Evander, you asked where they grew. I told you the Highland Meadows. That was true. But the first ones I brought you, I picked from my mother's garden, the plot I maintain behind my quarters. She's been dead for 15 years, but the flowers keep growing, and He stopped. His jaw tightened. I wanted to give you something that was real, something that came from a place that mattered. She stood up. She took his face in her hands, this impossible man, this ghost king, this warrior who left flowers on windowsills and remembered his mother's garden, and she kissed him so gently that it was barely a kiss at all, just a press of lips, a promise. Thank you, she whispered against his mouth, for the flowers, for all of them. His hands settled on her waist. He pulled her closer, not urgently, but certainly, the way you pull a door shut against the cold. You should probably know, he said, that Jocelyn is standing in the doorway and he's weeping. I'm not weeping, Jocelyn said from the doorway, very clearly weeping. I have allergies. This castle is dusty. I'm a professional. Please leave, Jocelyn. I'm leaving. But for the record, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever witnessed, and I'm including the sunset over Lake Argentum, which is widely considered the most scenic view in the Western Territories. Leave, Jocelyn. He left, still weeping, professionally. The council summit was held at Argenthold because Evander argued, correctly, that neutral territory was meaningless when the Northern Alpha Council had already declared its position, and hosting the summit on Silver Reach's soil was both a strategic statement and a practical advantage. The Alphas arrived over the course of 3 days. They came with retinues, banners, horses, and the specific air of people who were accustomed to being the most important person in any given room, and were now confronted with a room full of other people who felt the same way. Garrett came. He arrived on the second day with 20 warriors, his Blackmere banner, and Lenora, who looked even more tired than the last time Aveline had seen her. Lord Voss came separately, with his Goldenmere guard, and he brought his own wine, which suggested he did not trust Evander's hospitality. He was right not to. Evander had instructed the kitchen to serve Lord Voss exclusively from the oldest, most vinegary barrel in the cellar, which was the kind of petty excellence that Aveline found deeply satisfying. Alpha Maeve of Red Hollow arrived on the third day. She was a woman of 50, built like a stone wall, with iron-gray hair cut short and the handshake of a blacksmith. She took one look at Aveline and her face split into a grin. "Aveline Ashwood, I heard you stole 42 wheels of cheese and ran off with a Wolf King." "The cheese theft is accurate. The Wolf King part is more nuanced." "Is it? Because the Wolf King is standing behind you looking like he'd invade a continent if you asked." Evander, who was indeed standing behind Aveline, said nothing. But his chin lifted fractionally in a way that did not dispute the assessment. "How is the Red Hollow Forge cooperative?" Aveline asked. Maeve's expression changed. "Still open. They trained 6 new smiths this spring. You remembered." "I always remember." "I know you do. That is why I came." Maeve leaned closer. "Garrick offered me iron at ruinous terms and demanded control of my southern pass. My youngest forge steward could have written a fairer agreement while half asleep." "Can she?" "I would trust her figures before his," Aveline said. Alpha Auric of Ironwood was the last to arrive. He was older, late 50s, gray-bearded, with the weathered face of a man who had spent decades managing a mining territory and had the patience of a mountain. He was not friendly. He was not unfriendly. He was a man who wanted facts, and he wanted them delivered without ornamentation, and he had no interest in being charmed. "Lady Ashwood," he said when Aveline was introduced. "You're the one who wrote the trade proposal." "I am." "It's the most detailed economic analysis I've seen from any territory in 20 years. Your projected yield curves for silver exports are aggressive, but defensible. Your trade corridor routing saves my merchants 4 days of transit time, and your proposed tariff structure is irritatingly fair." "Thank you." It wasn't entirely a compliment. Irritatingly fair means I can't find a flaw in it, and I spent 3 days looking. He studied her. "You did Blackmere's accounts for 9 years?" "I did everything for 9 years." "Then Blackmere is an idiot." I try not to comment on the intelligence of my ex-husband in political settings. I have no such restraint. He's an idiot. The summit convened. The council chamber of Argenthold was arranged in a half-circle, with the Silver Wolf King's seat at the center and the visiting alphas arranged on either side. Evander sat with his council behind him. Aveline sat at his right hand, not behind, not below, but beside, and she could feel the weight of every gaze in the room settling on that arrangement and drawing conclusions. Garrick was directly across the chamber. His silver-gray eyes moved from Evander to Aveline to the space between them, and his expression was a masterwork of controlled neutrality that did not quite hide the storm beneath. "The Northern Alpha Council has declared the Silver Reaches a threat to territorial stability," said the council's spokesman, a round, officious man named Elder Harlan, who had the voice of a man who enjoyed hearing himself talk and the waistline of a man who enjoyed everything else. "We request the Silver Wolf King submit to council oversight of his borders, military, and trade operations." "Request," Evander repeated. "That's a polite word for a threat." "It is a diplomatic overture." "It is a threat dressed in diplomatic language, and we all know it. The question is what's behind it. Alpha Blackmere?" Garrick stood. He was tall and dark and commanding, and even Aveline, who was done with him, completely done, had to admit that he filled a room. "The Silver Reaches have been consolidating military power for 2 years, Garrick said. "The Western Pacts are now unified under a single king with an army larger than any individual Northern Pact can match. That represents a grave threat to the balance of power." "And grave threat," Evander said. "I united pacts that were starving, feuding, and dying. I built infrastructure, trade networks, and defensive positions. If stability is a threat, then I plead guilty." "Stability under your control?" "Under my stewardship. There's a difference. I govern with a council. You govern with a chair and a wife you replace when the first one becomes inconvenient." The room went dead silent. Garrick